This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
The month of May comes to the fall in 2019, and the 2019 OpenWheels.com 500-mile race is one of the most well-organized private events we've seen on the iRacing service in a long time, and we're going to be bringing you all the action here from iRacing and the iRacing Esports Network here on RaceBot TV. It's going to be Randy Cheneth, myself, Jack Stiles, and Tyler Maxson bringing you all of the action from this race today. And Jack, this is going to be a flagship event, I think, for the iRacing community for years to come.
It will. It is a brilliantly organized event. We are going to see a three-wide start here today in Indianapolis, something which we don't see very often. The pace car being driven today by 7-time Indy 500 starter Richie Hearn, and we'll see him out on the circuit in just a few moments' time. The field, it's star-studded. We have previous winners of the iRacing Indianapolis 500. It's going to be a brilliant race and 500 miles of racing.
Jack mentioned that starting grid, and I am going to take you down it right now for the OpenWheels.com Indy 500. Let's start from the back. From the outside of the 11th row, it's going to be Andrew Wood starting P33, Silvio Sanchez in the middle, and Hugo Olsen on the inside. Into row 10, Brendan Lichtenberg representing Team Broken Arrow will start on the outside, AJ Burton up the middle, and Andres Eek up the inside. Matt Pavelski will represent the outside of row number 9. Dakota DeCenzo will be starting in the middle with Total Downforce Racing with Team Talent, and John Downing from Sadie Sim Autosport will be on the inside row for row number 9. Row 8 is going to be held by Simon Bryant from Sadie Sim Autosport. John Downing's teammate Rob Powers of Kinetic Racing with Team Talent will be in the middle with Austin Espati from Team Talent on the inside of row number 8. Row 7, Zach Campbell from Apex Racing Team with Indy 500 Group will be starting on the right-hand side of row 7 with Chris Stouffer, who had one of the most consistent qualifying runs of all qualifiers, will start in the middle, and Riley Thompson will be on the left-hand lane for that. Row 6, Dylan Freckleton from Team Independent will be on the outside. David Adams in the middle representing Team Sadie Sim Autosport, and Tim Doyle, one of the most long-running members of the iRacing IndyCar community, will be on the inside. Row 5, Adam Blocker from Power Slide Motorsports will be on the right-hand lane. Joe Branch from Team Ludicrous Speed will be in the middle, and Liam Quinn will be on the left-hand side of row number 5. Row 4, Rick Music on the inside for Sadie Tim Autosport. Joshua Chin, another one of the longest-running runners in this community, he'll be starting in the middle, and Logan Simmons will be on the left-hand side as we crack the top 10 and get to row number 3. Christopher Demerit in the number 144 Broken Arrow with Indy 500 Group Machine will start on the outside of row 3. Bradley Walters in the middle, and Marco Aurelio Brazil will be on the inside. Row 2 is going to have Jeff Drake from Team Talent starting on the right-hand lane. Henry Bennett in the middle with Michele Costantini on the inside of the second row. And that leaves us with the final 3 starters starting at the head of the field. On the outside from Team Talent, the setup mastermind himself, we have John Hajic Doggett. In the middle from Team Interlagos Motorsport, the Brazilian from car number 421, it's Wilson Neto. And on the inside of the front row, a legend of the iRacing IndyCar community and a legend here at the virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It is the Snake Pit, young. Oh, the field has already gotten themselves rolling off here. Jack, you mentioned a unique starting procedure here. These guys will be doing 3 pace laps as opposed to, they'll be doing 4 pace laps as opposed to the usual 2 that we normally see. We see that Cadillac at the head of the field, getting the field lined up and going.
It is. Everyone seems to be lined up in that 3-wide starting formation all the way down the grids. And of course, everyone going to be leaving that gap between each grid as well. You can see them, everyone filing onto the back straight. 200 laps, 500 miles, Tyler. It's a brilliant race, this one, the Indy 500.
It really is. 500 miles of racing ahead of the drivers here today. We see the traditional 3-wide start behind the safety car. This is going to be an amazing race. The drivers were so close in qualifying. 0.08 of a second separated the entire field, so I expect the racing today to be just as close.
Racing's definitely going to be close here as these guys make their way. This is going to be their first pace lap behind Richie Hearn. Richie, an IndyCar veteran in his own right, has several starts in this event in the real world, Jack, and that's what's so good to have someone like him actually out there in the pace car.
Yeah, he's a driver who drove in IndyCar. He drove in kart as well. I believe he has 7 starts in the Indianapolis 500. So a driver who is very practiced around here. His latest run was in 2007 in the IRO 5. So one of the first generations we saw on the current IndyCar Championship in this string of series. Obviously, the Dallara IR18, the whole field. You could try and qualify with the DW12 or the IRO5, Randy, but no one made it into the field. The IR18, just another level with this latest version of the IndyCar chassis and a brilliant looking car as well.
Yeah, it definitely is, the IR18, and if you've tuned in for the event that we had a little bit earlier on this week, the Classic IndyCar Indianapolis 500, you're going to be seeing something a little bit different than what you saw in that event. These IR18s are a little bit more sensitive to the aerodynamic effects of the dirty air, so expect to see these cars, Tyler, push a little bit more in that dirty air than you see in that older chassis. And as well, if you watch qualifying a couple of weeks ago, this is going to be a very, very different experience from what you saw during the qualifying format, because in that, the cars are getting pushed to their absolute limit in the qualifying session, where guys were pushing it and wanting only needed the car to last for about 4 laps. Here, you're going to have the cars built a lot more differently. You're going to have the car built to try to survive in that dirty air, try to thrive in that dirty air, so you can be as flat out as long as you can. So there is going to be, to a certain extent, maybe the car is maybe a little bit more drivable in race trim, but you better make sure it is drivable, otherwise you're in for a long day of racing here for 500 miles.
Yeah, you certainly want a very balanced setup whenever it comes to your race day. You don't want something that's going to be too difficult to drive, but you also don't want something that's going to be too slow either. So it's pretty much just finding that fine line of drivability and also safeness, really, that's going to get you to the end of the race. So it's a difficult task to try and get these cars set up, but it's an even more difficult task to get these cars to the end of the 500 miles. It is a long race ahead of these guys. They're going to pretty much have to be picture perfect if they want to be able to take the overall win, but it's still doable for a lot of these guys.
Jack, I know you've been around this community for a while now, especially doing Classic IndyCar Series. These guys are about to venture off on their final of their 4 pace laps. They had 4 laps in qualifying. They'll get 4 laps to pace around the racetrack, and they'll be getting the 1 to go mark this time off, this time across start finish, and we will be seeing the green flag this time off of turn number 4. Richie Hearn will cross the start finish yard of bricks this time, and these guys will head out for one more observation lap. Who's your predictions to take home one of the what might be the biggest Indy 500 we've ever seen on the iRacing on the iRacing service?
We've got 5 previous winners of the iRacing Indianapolis 500 in the field today. They are, of course, the 5 people you're looking at. Logan Simmons, a name that we've never really seen in Indy 500 racing before, other than in the Classic IndyCar Series. He is very quick here. He shooed that 2 weeks ago in the CIS 500 mile. Watch out for Joshua Chin as well. He's the master of strategy, can really pull off some brilliant games, but I think my money is going to be on the driver of Michele Constantini. I've been following him for a couple of years now in IndyCar racing. He's going from strength to strength with that Apex Racing team. He's always a driver who excels here at Indianapolis. I think he's going to do very, very well today.
Richie Hearn has been given the command to accelerate away from the field, which means that there is no safety car out in front. The field will pace itself, and it will be in the command of race control and Tanner Watkins. So as they roll down the back straightaway and in towards turns 3 and 4 for the final time at the north end of the racetrack, get yourselves ready for 200 laps of action around the most iconic, most famous, and most important racetrack in the United States of America and possibly in the world. Through turn 3, they will pace themselves at 60 miles an hour. You can see the field trying to keep themselves formed up. The starting zone is going to be roughly off the exit of turn 4 and between the pit entry wall on the left-hand side. So that is where the command to start the race and the waving of the green flag will happen. Off of turn 4, we wait for Tanner Watkins. The field waits in anticipation to go racing and to scream into turn 1, 3 wide, which will be a unique experience for many of these drivers for the first time. We wait, the flag gets waved, they drop the throttle, and we are green in the open wheels 500-mile race. Presented by Mitchell Transmissions. Young O able to open up a gap here on the opening lap. The fight for second will pick up, but they will single file out through the apex of the corner. The entire field looking and fighting for any positions they can get out on the racetrack, but I think mostly here, Jack, just trying to get themselves in line.
Everyone seems to be looking single file, a bit of side by side, 2 wide is for the front of the field, but at the moment, at the head of the field, still the driver of Yang Hu from the pole position. However, Wilson Neto now down the inside into turn number 3 by the looks of things, has got the 421 up into the race lead. Watch out for the number 4, Jeff Drake as well, coming through. Who looks to have got a good start, but all of a sudden, he's lost his momentum. We're looking at almost going 3 wide. We are indeed down the main straight as we head on to lap number 2.
This definitely is not the classic IndyCar Series. Indy 500 and Wilson Neto will lead here as they work down through turns 1 and 2 for the second time. And down the back straightaway, in the background, I think I see Jeff Drake trying to make moves on Michele Costantini in front of them. The field jockeying for position everywhere. The draft, we know, is really powerful in this car. Side by side for second, Young O is going to fall another position, and that's going to be Michele Costantini. He goes to P2, and he wants more. Give me, that's not Michele.
That looks to be the driver of Marseille, Brazil. Looks as though the Brazilian has got himself up into second position. Michele Costantini now putting the pressure onto Young O. Red looking to the outside to turn 1, but he's going to have to hold off his attack. Redby Bennett's down to the inside. The Brit to the inside through turn 1, that infamous green and red machine that we see oh so often in IndyCar racing, and he's going to slot himself back in behind the Italian driver in the number 66. But the battle for the race lead, Brazil versus Neto, they're going to go side by side down the back straight for the 3rd time, and it looks as though the inside is going to go to Wilson Neto, and that seems to be the line that's working so far in the opening stages of this race.
The Brazilians dominated the month of May here on the iRacing service just a handful of months ago when they run 1-2 in the open wheels 500-mile race. Wilson Neto leads, Marco Aurelio Brazil in second. Are they going to stay in that order as they get to the yard of bricks and into turn 1? Let's find out. Up the inside, Marco Aurelio Brazil wants it. He's just going to get that race lead. Young O has still settled into the 3rd spot, which is where he lies. Michele Costantini sits P4, P5 will be Henry Bennett, your top 5 as they run. But Tyler, this entire field, we're 3 laps into this thing and there is no separation anywhere. This is still one long train of 33 cars and the fight is on for the lead again.
Yeah, the fight is still on for the lead. This is a 33-car train, like you said. No one giving each other anything here on the start. They really haven't separated out at all. Look at Marco Brazil down the inside here of what looks to be Wilson Neto. He's going to try it around the outside through turn number 1. As they head through, though, it will be Marco Brazil who will slot himself up into the lead, but he won't hold on to it for long. Look at Wilson Neto. Look at the tractor down the back. They're going to try to move into 3 and 4. These two, though, have, I think, probably the biggest gap that this entire field has is these two out front.
Yeah, the margin's growing now, P2 to P3. You see Young O, he's sort of settled into that dirty air and trying to cycle it out as Wilson's going to hold on to that race lead for just a couple of moments this time. Through the entire field, though, everyone's going to be feeling the effects of that dirty air here, Jack. We talk about how well this car works in the slipstream. That has a double-sided effect When a car works really well in the draft, that means it gets really affected in the corners, and you can see as we ride on board here with Zach Campbell, guys are already looking for different lanes to work with, and you see the cars out at the head of the field, maybe scrapping once again. Marco Brazil has been able to get the lead. Wilson Neto wants it back, as actually Zach Campbell's going to try to look up the inside and gain spots as well. But these guys are really having to work these cars, and you're seeing how the cars kind of in the mid-pack are stalled out, as opposed to the cars that are sort of second, third in line, where your top two can fight, but everyone else is kind of isolated and can't really do as much.
And obviously, for anyone who would have watched the qualifying coverage, the kind of car they're driving today is going to be a completely different beast in qualifying. You want a car that's slick, car that's going to work in the clean air. Here, you need to set one up that's going to work in the draft, because at Indianapolis, we've seen this in the opening stages of this race. You don't really spread the field out. You spend most of the 500 miles sat in a pack of cars, and you really do need a car that's going to work well in stream. The drivers who've got that car here today, they're going to be the ones that excel over the course of this race.
That's going to be the case, definitely, as these guys work their way through and back around the racetrack once again, starting to maybe spread out a little bit. We've had a couple of drivers start moving through the field in some nice ways, but for the most part, everything's still single file. Still have 32 cars running out there on the racetrack. I believe we lost Dylan Freckleton in the early laps. He has found himself 8 laps down. He is the only car not on the racetrack and still in the open wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions. Down the back straight now for what's going to be the 11th time, and Wilson Neto and Marco Aurelio Brazil are going to fight for it again, and they are going to take it. And Tyler, this is somewhat similar to what we've seen in years past, mostly with the DW12 chassis. We saw the IR18 chassis now the last couple times. We haven't seen that sort of draft hopping, especially at the head of the field in real life as of late in this new chassis. But these guys at the head of the field, both Neto and Brazil, even though it looks like they're fighting tooth and nail, they really are kind of working with one another relatively closely. They're timing their passes in such a way that they're not side by side through the corners for the most part. So even though it looks like, maybe you might expect they're losing a bunch of time, they're actually likely gaining time leapfrogging like this for the top 2 spots.
Yeah, they really are. They're actually, like you said, it may look like they're battling each other. They're actually helping each other here by going for it. As Michele Constantini will slot himself up in P3 there just in the background. And Young O seems to have a bit of issues here. He's dropping down the field. He's now dropped another position. That's another 2 positions now. So Young O, possibly some problems for him.
And this is something, Jack, that this could be a compounding thing for Young O. He may have thought if he's starting in the top 3, he may have came into this race with a setup that's relatively trimmed out because he's starting at the head of the field, which is something these guys will do. These drivers have aerodynamic adjustments they can make over the course of this event on pit road, as well as the in-car, as well as pit stop and tire pressure adjustments you can make on pit road. You also, of course, have the in-car tools of the weight jacker and the front and rear anti-roll bar. I have a feeling that Young O started this race with a trimmed-out race car, and now that he's gotten past, he's gotten into a huge flux of dirty air. You see him drop more and more positions down the front straightaway. I think that car just cannot handle in the dirty air right now, and he's just falling like a stone because of it. He's nearly outside the top 20.
He's currently in 15th, 16th position now is Young O, and by the looks of things, he's lifting a lot through the corners. These guys are sort of taking these corners at 215, 220 mile an hour. I'm not seeing more than 203 from Young O through 1 and 2 this time, so really struggling with that 23 again, coming through turn 3 a little bit quicker this time. Seems to have found a little bit more pace. He's found some clean air for his car. He might now be able to pick up the pace just a little bit, but he's dropped down into 17th position. He was 12th as they crossed the yard of bricks last time. That's going to go down another 5. So for Young O, a really bad start to this race. A long way to go. Don't forget, still 189 laps still to contest. But he's got to get his head down and get himself back up. That first round of pit stops as well, going to be very important for him to make the adjustments that he needs to his car so that works in that dirty air.
Michele Constantini is trying to go to work now on Marco Aurelio Brazil back towards the head of your line of cars and your line of racing. That fight for second going to be a little more interesting possibly, with Wilson Neto able to open up a little bit of a gap at the head of the field off of turn 4 and down the front straightaway for what is now the 12th time in the race thus far. And actually, Marco's going to fight here, Marco's going to fight for the inside line for the race lead. Wilson Neto through turn 1 had the lead. He's not going to hold it. Move Marco Aurelio Brazil, Tyler, back to the point.
Yeah, Marco Aurelio Brazil back to the point here, but Wilson Neto's not letting him take it for long. He's going to go back down the inside here. They're going to go 2 by 2. No, they're not, through turn 3. Marco Brazil, he's going to lift out of it just a little bit, but keep an eye on Michele Constantini. I think that he's going to have a pretty good run here. He seems to have a very good race car underneath him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he can keep that through this 200-mile race.
So let's see these guys work their way down now. Michele trying to work the rearview mirror of Marco Brazil, but it's not going to work as Marco back assaulting Wilson Neto. He'll have the lead again as he worked through the short chute already of turns number 1 and turn 2. And we're going to have to keep mentioning it, I think, Jack, because it was in such close proximity, and it's still, I think, in the back of everyone who was involved's minds. This is a very different race in this classic IndyCar Indy 500 we saw, I think it was now 3 weeks ago. And while a lot of people might say that's not entirely relevant, the honest-to-God truth is a lot of the IndyCar community would have watched that event. A lot of the IndyCar community partook in that event, so they know how that race would have been. They know how that track would have developed, where we saw a sort of weird thing where the outside line was where you wanted it to be. This racetrack is forming up very differently, and these cars are working very differently from what we saw for the IR05.
As you say, there's drivers in the top 10, drivers all the way through this field who took part in that race 2 weeks ago. It's a very different change to change these IR18, a lot faster, as you say. The aerodynamics working a lot more, much more about that aerodynamics on this car. Henry Bennett now down to the inside of Michele Constantini into turn number 3. This is for 3rd position. The Brit's been trying to get past the Italian for quite a few laps now, and it looks to be that he may just get the job done, but he doesn't. The Italian of Constantini gets the better run off the corner. He gets the draft of Wilson Neto, who in turn is down to the inside of Marco Brazil for the race lead into turn number 1, Randy. He looks to have got the move done.
Yep, great move there by Wilson Neto to take the point. I will say, if you started on row 7, you had a pretty high likelihood of keeping this car moving forward and having a great start. Zachary Campbell started this race from the outside of the 7th row in 21st. He sits in 4th, and we are less than, 15 laps into this race. You also have Chris Stouffer, who we saw, Tyler, having an amazingly consistent qualifying run on the first day of qualifying. He started just to the left of Zach Campbell in the 20th position. He's up P7, so those guys, they've had a pretty busy opening 15 laps, and they've pretty much done the opposite of what our pole sitter Young O has done. They've only moved their way forward through this line of cars, as Zach Campbell is going to fight with Henry Bennett to hold on to that 4th spot.
Yes, Zach Campbell and Chris Stouffer, those two were really, really quick, and I had a feeling that they were going to move their way through the field, but like you said, they did exactly the opposite of what your pole sitter did, and right now, Young O really not having any sort of luck in moving back forward. He's still down in the 18th position, but Chris Stouffer and Zach Campbell, after starting on the 7th row, are really making a good run here of this, and like you said, we're only about 16 laps in.
And let's talk a little bit about strategy and fuel economy here, Jack, because we know that typically these cars, you generally see about 36 laps. That's about the margin you can expect on a fuel run. Because of the extra laps they did of course the full iRacing pace laps, and then they did 3 extra on top of this that they manually added into the lap counter so that they could get the 3-wide grid sorted out. They're probably not going to go that full 36 laps on this opening stint. Maybe 35. Wouldn't be surprised to see some guys come down 34 laps into the race from the drop of the green flag. But after that, you should likely be expecting, guys, 36 laps is likely going to be your sort of expected fuel economy for running at a race pace. You, of course, can do some crazy things to maybe somehow save a little bit of extra fuel with the fuel mats, but that's only likely going to come up in a crazy situation as Marco Brazil is going to look down the inside and go back to that race lead as they work back down once again in toward turn number 2. So 36 laps of fuel and probably 4 tires every time you hit pit road as well.
Yeah, the 4 tyres seems to be the strategy you want at Indianapolis. Just unbalancing the car with the tyres is the last thing you want to do. Is again a change in the race lead, and Wilson Neto is going to get himself back up to the sharp end of the field. I think these guys are actually switching places for a little bit of strategy. Not a bad idea. It's going to help them pull away from the rest of the pack. It seems to be working at the moment. They want to get Michele Constantini. He's the one they've got to watch out for, because again the race lead will change into turn number 1. So, Randy, it looks as though it's more of a strategy thing, them swapping around the top 2 positions just so the draft works. They're always in a draft. They can save a little bit of fuel at the same time and try and start to pull away from the rest of the field.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be the situation here for these guys who work down the back straightaway once again. These guys, this whole field is still so close. from your race leading car of Wilson Neto, who's currently Wilson Neto, but Marco Brazil is trying to change that. But Wilson Neto, all the way back to the car running 30th. There's only 9 seconds, Tyler. You drop another 4 seconds back in. You get to the 7 of Austin Espati, who may have had some problems, but he settled in a few seconds off the back of the field, as still side by side the pair of Brazilians are for that race lead. And through turn 1, is Wilson Neto going to take it and get clear? Yes, he will, but can Michele Costantini cycle through? No, he cannot, and he is stuck. And that third place car just seems stuck, Tyler, with the way the arrow is currently working. We've not seen Michele Costantini really be close to making a pass. What we saw there through the short chute and entering turn 2 was the closest he's been.
Yeah, that was about the closest that he's been in some laps time. I think what you're seeing here is he's just getting stuck in that dirty air, and he just can't get his nose in. But I think if he got to the lead of this train, I think that he would be able to stick up there. But right now, he's just kind of getting stuck in that dirty air and really just not able to move himself up any more positions. And I think that Zach Campbell as well is kind of in that same scenario. Maybe he's burned off his tires just a little bit trying to get himself up through the field. We should be seeing these guys come down to pit road in about the next 10 to 15 laps. So there's really not a whole lot of time left on this set of tires and this fuel tank. So the cars will be getting lighter at this later end of the run.
Yeah, and that's definitely going to be changing how these cars feel. But notably as well, on top of that, Jack, as you're definitely not Connery, tires are going to be a huge thing. We didn't get a chance to go over a weather report before the drop of the green flag. It's relatively tame conditions in the sim for these guys. 79 degrees Fahrenheit on the track temp, 108 degrees Fahrenheit on the track temperature. And the winds are relatively calm as well. So because of that temperature, it's not too extreme. It's kind of ideal, sort of. It's maybe a little on the warm side, but we shouldn't be seeing any crazy tire fall off, I think, due to that weather from what we might have normally expected.
And that's going to be an interesting development throughout this race, just to see how the temperatures change, just early midday in the sim. Of course, as we go on during the race, that time will go on, the sun will start to drop. Maybe we might see some clouds overhead. It might drop the track temperature just a little bit, but I can see it staying quite constant here today for these drivers. And of course, not blisteringly hot track temperatures, as you say, but it could have a little bit of a detrimental effect on the tires. However, over the course of about 30, 35, 36 laps, I can't see that being a major issue.
It's right on board a little bit with Michele Costantini, who sits third, and we'll see why this third place stalls out the way they do. You see 231 mile an hour top speed, probably going to be the quickest of the 3 cars in front of him. Just the problem is, doesn't ever get a lane or a lane of the racetrack to work with. Let's see what the speed is off of turn 4. That car's scrubbing a little bit of speed through turn 4, but in towards turn 1. Turn 1 is generally identified by most as the most difficult of the corners. You enter it at the highest rate of speed, 234. You saw there on the graphic as you turn in, and that's a big effect, Tyler. 4 mile an hour don't sound like much, but the way these 4 corners are profiled, and the leaders ahead are side by side once again to Michele Costantini, but the way the corners are profiled, and was turn 1 really feeling like one of the most difficult on the racetrack, that's going to be a big change, as Michele was thinking of making it 3 wide, but wisely chose not to. Can he get around Marco though? No.
Yeah, he's not able to get himself up there, but he thought about making it 3 wide. That was really, really close, so that would probably not have ended well. From the way the 2 Brazilians were heading down that back straightaway, I would have thought that there would have been a pretty big pileup going into turn 3. He chose wisely to not take that, but let's see if he can make that run up again. Michele Costantini, he's got some speed, but it's all about whether he can get clear of the 2 drivers ahead of him. They're still going side by side down the back straight once again. The 2 Brazilians really trying to work together here and pull away from Michele, but it's really not happening.
How many lead changes have we had now, Jack? Are we cleared like 100 yet?
We must be getting close, because I'm pretty sure we're doing 2 a lap, and we're now on lap 25. So I reckon we're at about 30, 40 lead changes so far. We've only done 25 laps of this 200-lap race. So for Wilson Neto and Marco Brazil, this is clearly a strategy thing. They wouldn't choose to change this often. Michele Costantini now right on the tailpipe of Wilson Neto, just a 10th between the 2. And Marco Brazil has managed to get away. So for Michele Costantini, this is crunch time. Can he get a move into turn number 3? He's looking, you can see it with the body language he's putting into that 66 machine, but no move going to come. Michele's got history with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Randy. This is somewhere he's always wanted to win at. Today would be the perfect chance for him to do it.
And that car just kind of stalled out on the back straightaway on him. I think Wilson Neto was able to get enough of that slipstream from the car in front of him, even though that Michele had the run. Michele just could not get close enough to even think about making that move. We're going to find ourselves 27 laps into the stint this trip around the racetrack as they work through turn 2. So less than 10 laps here, Tyler, from expected green flag pit stops.
Yeah, 10 laps away here from the pit stops. It doesn't look as if we're going to get a caution flag anytime soon, so I think we're going to be seeing quite a bit of green flag pit stops here today. And like I said, we're just about 10 laps away from it, so it'll be interesting to see who can get on and off pit road the best, because that is going to be, I think, where most track position is going to be made up. And I think that that's going to be a race leader, Marco Brazil, into the pit lane.
And that's interesting, talking about this strategy here. Jack, I would not have expected they would come down pit road this early.
So we are 31 laps since we got going. So we've been running about 28 laps now by the looks of things. It's going to be looking as though, as Michele Constantini, the Italian, has managed to get himself up into the lead. He's got himself past Wilson Neto at the start of that lap while we were looking at the driver of Marco Brazil down onto the pit lane as we ride on board with the number 66 now, Randy. He's managed to get himself past and up into the lead. Now it's crunch time. He's got to try and pull a gap, so he's got a little bit of cushion on pit road.
Yeah, well, we've not seen anyone open up a gap whatsoever over the course of this event, so if he's able to do it, it'd be quite a big shock. But I'm trying to think back to the month of May, Jack, and you might remember, I know that one of the big talking points this month for the iRacing.com Indy 500 was the fact that there was so much representation from the Brazilian community. I think of the top 33 cars, I think if I remember correctly, it was something like 14 or 15 of them were from Brazil, heavily supported by Mr. Marco Aurelio Brazil and Wilson Neto back during the month of May. And if what I recall back then, when we actually got into the race, there weren't that many of them, only about 5 or 6 of them made the top split race. And as well on top of that, they couldn't really go a full run on their set. But a number of cars ducking down pit road here early, only 30 laps in since the drop of the green flag. Maybe drivers burnt a little bit more fuel than we expected in that opening laps with the grid situation.
Yeah, so it looks as though Wilson Neto, Matt Pauleski, AJ Burton and John Downing are all down onto the pit lane this time around. So more drivers coming down onto the pit lane. This is going to leave an Apex Racing team at 1-2 out on the track with Michele Constantini and Zach Campbell running P1 and P2 as it stands. We'll wait to see what they do as they exit on turn 4 this time. Michele Constantini, he's going to dive left. He's down onto the pit lane. His teammate's going to follow him in the form of Zach Campbell. So onto the pit lane, both of those drivers will come. They clearly used a little bit more fuel at the start of this race than we thought, Randy, to only be running this far into the stint.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People have mentioned it in the chat, and I just wanted to make sure so people absolutely know. Only 33 cars started this race. 38 in total were in the session. 3 of those, I think maybe even 4 of those were alternates, and one of those was Richie Hearn for race control. We'll take a look at the pit stop time here for Michele Constantini. He's currently in the pit box. It's going to be 8.9 seconds for the Apex team with Indy 500 group. So the number 66 will venture back out onto the racetrack. And I know he had help when he came onto pit road, but I don't see his teammate anywhere here, Jack, exiting the pit lane. There's Young O, and there's Zach Campbell. So Zach's lost a ton of time, a 9.4 second stop, 43.4 lane time there for him. We compare that to Michele here.
That's a long time on the lane.
That's 9 seconds, yeah.
Yes, 9 seconds longer. Something happened to Zach Campbell. I did see him lock up Cameron down onto the pit lane, so whether he maybe just hit it a little bit too quickly, we are not sure. Wilson Neto in the 421 has received a warning for staying far right while traveling down the pit lane, so not using the fast lane correctly by the looks of things. And thank you, Tyler. Zach missed his box.
Yeah, so unfortunate there for Zachary Campbell. Going to see him drop down the order. Rick Music, Sadie Sim Autosport. He's another name that's been in the IndyCar community for years. We've seen him recently come back and be as competitive as ever. He's going to relinquish the race lead and come down on towards pit road. Drivers behind do as well. Liam Quinn from Team Talent, as well as the third place running car of Joe Branch from Ludicrous Speed. And actually looks like Liam, I think, may have missed his pit box that time as well. But Joe Branch, the representative and league administrator here, Tyler, for the Indy Elite Series. And these guys are going to roll off the pit road now and cycle back out onto the racetrack. But pit stops, I think, hit a little bit earlier than we were expecting. I think I was expecting these guys to push a little bit closer to 33, 34 laps, but still somewhat thereabouts in the window based on everything in regards to that. But what's important to me is the fact that both of those drivers near the head of the field, the Brazilians at the head of the field, couldn't stay out there for as long as anybody else. And oh, by the way, through the pit stop cycle, Michele Costantini has split them.
Yeah, so Michele Costantini actually was leading here coming onto this, but Marco Brazil was able to get a wonderful draft down the back straightaway. But Michele Costantini down the inside once again, and Marco Brazil, they're going to go side by side through turn number 1, but Brazil got him through 3 and 4, and now Michele Costantini will take the lead once again. And these front 3 have absolutely checked out from Henry Bennett behind.
This graphic at the top of the screen will change constantly for the current leader of the race. It's Michele Costantini. Last time they changed it, but Marco Brazil wants it back as he goes up the inside of turn 3. So get used to seeing that graphic on the top left-hand side of your screen cycle through a number of drivers over the course of this race. Fastest lap of the motor race at the moment here, Jack, held by Joshua Chin at a 39.402, and that's going to be someone that was sort of buried down in the mid-pack as they work through turn 3 once again, and that's sort of expected because of draft and the dirty air. There's such a big hole in the air getting punched in the middle part of the field. It's pretty likely that the draft is going to be really powerful there, and that's why you're going to see these guys maybe running 10th, 15th with quick race cars. Those will probably be where some of the quickest laps of the race come from, purely due to the slipstream.
Yeah, this is a front-running pack. It's a pack of 6 cars. Henry Bennett currently sitting, or Josh Chin, sorry, currently sitting 4th in that pack, so definitely got the draft. Watch out for Josh later on in the race. We know he's a master of the fuel saving and a master of the strategy in that 93 Team Chimera machine, so he will wake his way through the field, I'm sure, towards the end of this event. That was how he won his iRacing Indianapolis 500 last year, and has been an absolute beast in this IR18, Randy. Josh Chin, definitely still one of the favourites, however, still sitting down in 7th. Didn't have a great qualifying. He started 11th. He got onto the field, but he missed out on that fast 9.
Yeah, that he did for Joshua Chin. We have a take a look. We take a look at the pit stop time that he saw. You see the cars in front of him still side by side as they work through turn 3 and off towards turn 4. So Josh Chin representing Team Talent and Team Chimera with the Craig setup shots colors on the side of that machine. Down the front straightaway they will go. I'll say the Craig's logo with Craig's face on the side of the car, but maybe not Craig's colors. But still, Michele Costantini able to now command this field, Tyler. And this is important because we saw the 2 Brazilians of Brazil and Neto really command the field through that first fuel stint. Now that Michele has been able to split them, they're not going to be able to control the field as much. But that said, Marco and Michele, they're pretty much doing the same thing that Marco and Wilson were doing. They're just commanding the field from the front, and they're just leapfrogging with one another. And that 3rd place running car, this time of Wilson Neto, just seems kind of stuck.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much just how this is running. The front 2 just continuously swap positions and just get the draft off each other, and then the guy in 3rd is pretty much either saving fuel because he's stuck there, or just can't get by anyway, even if he wanted to. So I think that really, that was how Michele was able to stretch out the first stint so long, was because he saved fuel behind this front 2 for the entire time that they were going at it, and they were burning off all the fuel. So it's just going to be, I think, a game of leapfrog. I wouldn't be surprised if Wilson Neto was able to jump both of these guys in the next stint and will retake the lead.
Across the yard of bricks, they will come once again. Michele Costantini wants the race lead as we check over to some of our static cameras through the apex of the corner. You can see the cars as they're able to just somehow retain traction and grip to the bottom end of the racetrack through turn 2. You see that whole field coming, and off of turn 2, the top 3 will scream by. We'll check back in with this sort of second group as well. That's 5 or 6 cars strong as they go whizzing by the cameras at over 200 miles an hour, Jack.
Yeah, incredible views that you get here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. A little bit of side-by-side in that second pack that we're seeing. I believe that may have been Riley Thompson trying to get himself around the driver of Christopher Demerit, potentially, or Bradley Walters, in fact, it was, trying to get past the driver of Riley Thompson that time, coming into turn number 3. As we look at the second pack, and we've got moves for 4th position. Adam Blocker, a previous winner of the iRacing Indianapolis 500, getting himself past Henry Bennett. Henry Bennett going to just slot in behind.
Yeah, Bennett's going to sit there and relax, and it's important to remember, Tyler, that this second group, they're now so separated from that lead trio of Brazil, Costantini, and Neto. These guys will essentially be doing the same thing that the leaders are doing. You can see it right there. Blocker had just passed Henry Bennett. Bennett gets the run down the back straightaway. Blocker lets him through. So even though they're 2 or 3 seconds down the racetrack from the drivers who are leading the race and leading the laps, these guys are doing essentially the exact same thing to try to maximize their speed and try to reel in that trio in front of them. They're just swapping this lead of this second line back and forth, back and forth. And again, you see that third car in line, Chris Stouffer is the name this time, completely stalled out and can't really do anything with it. Now the 007 doesn't get a great run. That might open the door for Blocker, or excuse me, for Chris Stouffer, but no, that's not going to end up panning out in actuality, and Bennett's going to go back to the inside of Blocker, and he'll take that spot back. So it's not just the leading cars that have to deal with this, it's the leading cars at the head of a train of cars that are having to do this.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I'm just taking a look here. This second group of Henry Bennett and Adam Blocker, with them doing all of this, they're actually starting to reel in your front group. They have now down to 2 seconds that time by. They were at 2.2, so they are starting to catch the front group of 3 of Michele Constantini, Marco Brazil, and Wilson Neto. So this second group really seemed to make this work out for them, and it's starting to close that gap just that little bit.
And it's not small margins as well. As we take a look actually at the lap counting comparison here, Jack, it's a little bit difficult because I'm having to constantly correct for who's in fourth, but you see there for Henry Bennett, a 10th.5 quicker than Wilson Neto 3 laps ago, about a 10th a couple laps before that, 3 full 10s taken out that last time. Now it's important to mention that Neto sort of dropped off the back of that top 2 a little bit, so I think it's very likely that Neto's probably lost that slipstream as we take a look at the lap counter in comparison to Michele Constantini. And Neto was a little slower last trip around the racetrack, but he is basically on pace with those 2 cars in front of him on a lap by lap basis.
Yeah, it's a very close times up at the front of the field. However, the guys running in that second pack, currently being led by Henry Bennett, they were all faster than the leading 3 last time around the racetrack. So they are gaining, and they are now back fast as 1 pack. Okay, there's still a gap between 3rd and 4th, and a gap between 4th and 5th. However, they are all going to be running in the same draft. Everyone's going to be advancing on that one. So all of a sudden, the lead battle's gone from 3 all the way back up to 9.
And actually talking about this group, Henry Bennett's currently in 4th. I think he's gotten into Wilson Neto's slipstream, so you're starting to see this second pack here, Tyler, is actually stringing out, and we're not seeing the leapfrog anymore now that Henry Bennett has that draft from the car in front. So now it's going to go from Henry Bennett and Adam Blocker, who are leapfrogging, to probably Henry Bennett and Wilson Neto. But actually, that said, they're so close to that top 2. I'm not sure if this second train of cars now held and now led by the 421 of Wilson Neto. I don't think we're going to be seeing as much leapfrogging because of their proximity to the duo out in front.
I'm not too sure because they're now down to a second. Neto has really got dropped off the back of those front 2. And in my opinion, Henry Bennett needs to get Wilson Neto about as fast as he possibly can, because it doesn't seem as if Neto has the pace at this point, and he's going to do exactly that. He's going to try and slot himself up into P3. Henry Bennett himself up in 3rd spot. Now Wilson Neto's down to 4th. Is Adam Blocker going to be able to get by? Because if he can get by Wilson Neto, then I think that Henry Bennett seem to be able to work very well together, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to try and get those 2 together again.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right about that, as these guys circulate around the racetrack and continue to do so. But now it actually, seeming to me, Jack, Neto might be having some problems. He didn't get the line anywhere near correct for turn 1. He's dropped off the back of Henry Bennett, and he's stacking up behind him. I believe it's Chris Stouffer and Adam Blocker. Now Adam Blocker is going to get the run down the back straightaway, peek out the inside. Wilson Neto may be in a very similar situation to what we saw with Young O. We've seen this 421 pretty much at the head of the field. Remember, he was the representative for the middle of the middle line there, out there on the racetrack, and we've seen him just sort of, now that he's starting to get into some dirty air, he's starting to drop like a stone. Wilson may have had that car very, very trimmed out and is now struggling with the handling now that he's cycled in behind a number of cars.
It's interesting you should say about Young O. He is now a lap down, class in 30th position, so our pole sitter here today is now off the lead lap. He's clearly struggling with that 23, and as you say, we could be seeing the same now happening to Wilson Neto. He's down to 6th, and all of a sudden Joshua Chin, Jeff Drake and Christopher Demerit, they're closing up onto the rear of the 421, and he's going to really struggle, clearly struggling in that dirty air where we haven't seen that car much so far today, because he has really been up in the top 3 fighting for that race lead. All of a sudden he's out of the top 3 and that 421 is struggling. You've got to ask whether Marco Brazil has got the same thing on his car. Is his car going to be very trimmed out? If anything was to happen to him and gets him into the dirty air, all of a sudden he's flying back through the pack.
That was another big talking point during the month of May when we were doing the iRacing.com Indianapolis 500. The Brazilians, Jack, were the quickest in qualifying by a pretty wide margin. And like I said earlier, we didn't see as many as we were expecting actually make the top split race. Many of them, I think, just couldn't due to time zones or what have you. So there are only about 9 or 10 of them. And of those 10 cars, the ones that qualified, they were very bad in traffic. And it didn't even just come down to driving standards or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to say. The cars just didn't work. And even the guys that sort of qualified up near the head of the field, the only driver that was really able to keep pace from what I recall was basically the most experienced member of Marco Brazil, and even he was really struggling with that race car, and eventually I think within about the first half of the race was pretty much out of contention for the race win. So it was a talking point earlier this year that the Brazilians, maybe they were quick in qualifying and maybe over even a 4-lap run, but they didn't have a great race set. Now we're starting to maybe see that with Wilson Neto getting buried down in the mid-pack. Now that said, he sort of found a nice place to sort of stabilize behind the 13 of Chris Stouffer, but I think Josh Chin is going to want to make that move sooner or later.
He will, and for Josh Chin, he'll be anxious to get past because, okay, he can save some fuel behind Wilson Neto, but if Neto's just slightly off the pace, which it seems to be that he is, as Josh Chin, Jeff Drake were both faster last time around, they're both going to want to try and get past, get themselves a little bit further up the field. As you say, Marco Brazil still up at the front. He's the most experienced member of that Brazilian crew who turned up to the iRacing.com, iRacing Indianapolis 500. Same again here today, and he is still up at the front of the field. Able to see what is going to happen. We have now completed the first 25% of this race. 125 miles are done, 375 still to go. So a long way to go yet to find out what's going to play out in this race. However, at the moment, the Brazilians all seem to be having the same problem as Young O did as the driver of Wilson Neto drops back through the field.
And Tyler, as we start thinking about this again, I mean, it seems like it just happened, but we're going to be thinking, I think, about pit stop strategy time here relatively soon as we work lap 55. In lap for Michele Costantini was lap number 34. And remember, he came down pit road sort of amongst about the latest group of many of the drivers that came down pit road. Compare that to Marco Brazil. His in-lap would have been, I think, lap number 26. Overall, it's a little, his in-lap was technically 31 in the session, but of course we ran a number of the 4 pace laps, the 3 pace laps before we started the race. So we're pretty much already at that sort of pit stop time for these guys here in the next 3 to 4 laps. Second round of pit stops nearly coming up already as Bennett's caught the back of Marco Brazil.
Henry Bennett all up on the back now, Marco Brazil. It looks as if Brazil is starting to fall into the same problems that we saw Wilson Neto fall into, and pretty much all the Brazilians so far. They're all having issues with that race car here. So I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe I'd like to see, really, if Marco Brazil gets into some dirty air, if he's able to keep himself in the position, or if he just falls like a stone like the rest of the Brazilians have.
And Michele Costantini, and Marco Brazil around the outside will hold off the assault from Henry Bennett. I want to show a replay, but I'm not sure I'm going to have time with the way things are going. They're going to stay side by side here. Marco's line through turn 3 and 4 was absolutely horrible last time, and I'm a little shocked Bennett couldn't get the move done. What about this trip around the racetrack? Bennett, he's going to work through on turn 4 and try to set the move up. We're right on board with Henry Bennett as he tries to get to the rear here of Marco Brazil and get this second spot away. Marco is going to defend the inside line here down the front straightaway, and I'm going to be honest here, Jack, Bennett's not being aggressive enough in the slipstream. I think there was enough and plenty of time down that front straightaway for for Bennett to duck to the inside and keep behind Marco. That cost Henry, I think, a little bit of speed and a little bit of momentum, and I think if he had done that, especially with the outside line, seems like you're able to defend if you're on that outside line. We've seen that a couple times today. I think Henry may have had that second spot wrapped up.
And it was maybe just a little bit of hesitation from Henry as to why he didn't get the move done. I was watching that number 812 of Marco Brazil last time as he came through turns 3 and 4. He looked as though he got loose on the exit of 3, lost a little bit of momentum. So whether he came back on the exit of 4 for the run down the main straight, I'm not quite sure. Through 1, down the short chute, into 2 for the 56th time, and out onto the back straight. It looks as though, again, the gap has actually extended out just a little bit here, Randy. 3/10 now between the two. Half a second back to Adam Blocker in 4th.
And it's 8/10 of a second to your race leader, Michele Costantini, who we've seen be the first car to be able to really open up a gap here. And this is what's so interesting about this race, Tyler, is that, and this is a sign that it was Marco that's really dropping off. This is the first driver we've seen really open up a margin. We saw that Marco was sort of able to keep up there when he had a countryman that he was able to run with. Now that it's Michele Costantini out there, maybe Michele raced Marco a little bit harder than Wilson did. Maybe Marco had to work the tires a little bit harder. But now that, you know, we're sort of in this, he's dropped off the back of that current race leading car and into this field of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th on back nearly. So for Mr. Marco Brazil, this is not looking great for him, as we know he was also the earliest of all drivers to pit as well.
Yeah, he was the earliest of the drivers to pit, but last time by, he got that gap down to 0.6 of a second. So Marco Brazil seems to have figured something out. He's keeping it right at about 0.6 of a second now, and he's maintaining about a 0.3 gap back to Henry Bennett. So right now, it seems as if Marco Brazil has kind of figured something out with that race car, and he's seeming to get that car really hooked up here towards the latter end of the stage of the stint.
And Jack, our front row starters have not fared well in this event thus far. You go down them, Wilson Neto, of course, he's actually been the only one who's been able to really keep competitive in this race. He started, of course, in the middle of that front row. He currently runs 7th, but Youngo, your pole sitter, we've talked about him and the struggles he had. He's currently representing 1 lap down, showing 1 lap down. And John Hajiet-Doggett, of course, from Team Talent. I know that he's very important behind the scenes, but he just doesn't have the success a lot of the other Team Talent drivers typically have. He now finds himself 44 laps down off your race leaders, currently scored in 30 seconds. So the front row, even though people emphasized how important qualifying was, how important starting at the head of the field was, 2 of our top 3 cars are a lap down from where they started, and one of them is slowly getting shuffled down the running order after getting cycled into the dirty air.
I must admit, not quite sure what happened to the driver of John Hajiet-Doggett, but as that we're talking about that, Marco Brazil is down onto the pit lane once again. Another 31 lap stint for the 812. So are we seeing this Brazilian driver's kind of theme that we've seen before, Randy, with the fuel not being able to go as far as the 812 stops in his pit box and up onto the jacks he will go to get 4 brand new Firestone tires, full tank of fuel, and back out onto the racing surface.
So he's going to come out, and the thing that's interesting here to me, Tyler, is that if he's doing 30, 31 some odd lap stints and everyone else is doing 33, 34, that adds up to a pretty considerable number in terms of fuel. So he's going to, these guys were expected to be down pit road probably better part of 5 or 6 times over the course of this event. If you're constantly coming down 4 laps earlier than everyone else, that's 20 extra laps of fuel you need to put on that race car simply by not going that extra 3 or 4 laps that they can go. So what may sound like a small problem, in actuality ends up being a really, really big one. Now that said, because he's pitting earlier, he can take less fuel, but eventually he's going to have a pit stop where when everyone else has a splash and dash, he's going to have to, say, take 3/4 of a tank.
Yeah, and that can prove to be a really big problem for drivers. If they don't have the good fuel strategy throughout the race, it ends up creating problems for them towards the end, whereas, like you said, if a driver ahead of you has to take a splash and dash and you have to take over 75% of the fuel tank, you are going to lose quite a bit of time. And with how close this field is being, that 2 seconds or even half a second in the box is going to create a maybe 3 or 4 second gap out in the racetrack.
So we watched pit stop time here for Michele Costantini, 9.1. He's out and away. delta time on pit road, going to cycle into just under 34.8 seconds. So race leader is now going to be the 007 of Henry Bennett. We saw him start from the middle of the second row in that dark green and red 007. I remember having to go through for the graphics that we have on screen here, Jack. Henry is for such a long time, this is the livery he's run, this sort of dark green with the red trim. I know you typically hear people say that running a green car is bad luck, but Henry's always done quite well for himself and finds himself now leading the race during the pit stop sequence, and he's certainly running the top, I think 4 cars, now that the running order is kind of starting to settle out a little bit. He is doing great things out there as he'll come down pit road for his scheduled service here, second time on a green flag.
Yeah, Henry Bennett, for as long as I can remember, has ran that green and red paint scheme in IndyCar racing, and a driver who has always been fast. He has had a few moments of bad luck, Randy, but on the whole, he's a very quick driver, very lucky driver as well. Some good finishes. Never won an iRacing Indianapolis 500, and he's looking for his first win here today. He has just missed his pit box just slightly. Slight reversing needed for the Brit, and he's back out and away in a time of 9.6 seconds.
It's a little bit longer than some we've seen. Adam Blocker will be the next car to come down on towards pit road. He was currently leading the race. That'll cycle the lead to your 2018 iRacing.com Indianapolis 500 champion Joshua Chin, running for Team Talent. So he'll take the lead here. And Jack, this is again important. You mentioned it a little bit ago. It's always something I talk about and harp on because he's been my teammate for, going on 5 years now. I've known Josh, which I'm sure if you asked him, will say is much, much too long. Josh is one of the best on the service at fuel economy, and if we're going to get one of these races where there's cars doing 30, 31 laps, there's cars doing 30, 32 laps, he's going to find a way to get that number out to 33, maybe even 34. This time off of turn 4, he'll go 1 lap longer than the bulk of what we saw in terms of drivers out there on the racetrack, and I believe second place in the race lead, I was going to say Jeff Drake, but he pits. Liam Quinn pits, and that's actually important because I think that trio of cars of Chin, Drake, and Quinn, I think they pretty much all got the same mileage. We also have a couple of other cars in the background as well. I see Andrew Wood, who, by the way, if you take a look at that race car, the Team Talent machines, I'll bring up Andres Eakes just for reference. They all run the same base scheme. It's sort of that middle white line down the middle with a couple of highlight colors. Jack, I love the graphics design guy at Team Talent because Andrew Wood doesn't have a highlight color. He has a wood texture.
Yes, I have noticed that as well. Andrew Wood, a very, very interesting paint scheme on that number 32, of course. Came into here today, had to start at the back of the grid. He was just outside the cutoff on bump day. However, Brandon Traino had to withdraw from the race. So Andrew Wood got his place on the starting grid of the Open Wheels Indianapolis 500. Currently running in the mid-pack at the moment, Randy. He's been making his way through the field slowly, but watch out for the wooden number 32 towards the end of this event.
We're taking a look right now at the running order. Simon Bryant was recorded ahead of Michele Constantini, but I believe that has since changed. And actually, I'm seeing Joe Branch. Has Joe Branch been down pit road for a second time yet?
Nope.
No, so this is a phenomenal fuel economy from the Hoosier of Joe Branch. He lives in Indianapolis. He's run the Indy Elite Series for a number of years, and for Team Ludicrous Speed, this is great fuel economy from him. I think he was the only one to be able to go that far, Tyler.
I believe you are correct about that one, Randy. I think that he was the longest that anyone has gone. Thank you, Jack. 34 laps he did on that fuel tank. That is very, very good. But crucially, though, Marco Brazil has now dropped down behind Christopher, and he's now down into what is the net P3. And Michele Constantini, he's got about a 0.6 of a second gap over Chris.
What has happened to Andre Seek? Have I given him the commentator's curse by talking about his colors? I'm not sure if he has a penalty, but he's showing 1 lap down here, Jack, and he's back down on the pit stops. A 23.4 second pit road time. Did he somehow get a penalty, maybe an exit speed? Because there's no way he's not been on pit road that entire time. It's been over a minute since we talked about him. I think he likely sped on exit somehow, not sure how, but somehow, and went all the way back around the racetrack and had to come down pit road again.
Well, I'm now having a look. It was an extra stop that he has made. Was there potentially some pit lane speeding? I will go and review. I think if it's going to be anywhere, it will be on pit lane exit. It will indeed, because he came in behind Andrew Wood. He had a textbook stop by the looks of things. And I'm not sure why he got that penalty, actually. It may
He
be
in the middle of pit road, I think.
Ah.
He was going about 62 miles an hour in the middle of pit road.
So that was a pit lane speeding or
Yeah.
pit lane speed penalty.
And that is something that drivers will try to stretch, Jack. I think you know it as much as I do. In the sim, typically speaking, is actually seen your top two string themselves out to Michele Costantini, and now it's Christopher in the 13, who is now in the second spot, fighting with the race lead with Michele Costantini. The likes of Henry Bennett, Adam Blocker, and Marco Aurelio Brazil not that far off the back for third, fourth, and fifth. With this top three is definitely a top three, top four is all over each other. But Jack, I know you know as well as I do, the pit limiter in the sim tends to be about 1 to 2 miles an hour slower than what the technical maximum pit road speed delta is. So the trick that every driver has done, I remember mentioning this in a broadcast and getting yelled at by a Coanda driver for talking about it because they thought no one else known, when in reality I can tell you the entirety of the IndyCar community knew about it. They'll generally go down, and in these cars with very fast and very responsive gearboxes, you'll kind of shift up, shift down, shift up, shift down, and that's why sometimes when we go on onboards when they're on pit road, you'll hear the engine going because that's what it is, what they're doing, and they'll get sort of that extra 1 to 2 miles an hour by still using the limiter. I wonder if he's being a little bit too aggressive with that. I know often on a lot of the pit roads on the sim, you can kind of exceed that pit road maximum speed and not get hit with a penalty. I know that's something that drivers on the NASCAR side definitely perfect, is getting every mile an hour they can possibly get out of the car down pit road, and if they can go an extra mile an hour and just sneak under the algorithm that hands out penalties, they do it. I wonder if he was trying to push that a little bit too hard, and that's why we see him get slapped with that speeding penalty.
Yeah, I'd probably say a very similar thing as to why we have seen the driver of Andreas Eek back down onto the pit lane. I did spot that he was doing 62 mile an hour. I'm pretty sure the limit is 2 or 3 mile an hour over, and that's when you get stung with a penalty. So it is a trick which drivers use, and it is one which we see used often. So for Andreas Eek, it looks as though he just pushed that limit a little bit too far. The pit limiters in these Indy cars usually are pretty good. They will hold you at around 59 miles an hour. However, when you're fighting for the lead or fighting for a position in the middle of a pack, Randy, where everyone's really close together, that could be a tenth, and a tenth that you lose in the pit lane is going to be a lot more out on the racetrack at 220 miles an hour.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And talking a little bit about race trends, Tyler, we're definitely seeing the top two. The leader cannot really hold the lead for long. You're typically seeing this sort of shaky and bake sort of, you lead half a lap, I lead half a lap, you lead half a lap, I lead half a lap, going back and forth, back and forth. One of the other trends actually has been Brazilians and issues on pit road. Wilson Neto, I think the first round of pit stops, we saw the 421 get a warning for not staying on the far right-hand side of the pit lane while going down pit road. This time, actually, the second Brazilian, Marco Aurelio Brazil, he has just received that same warning. So interesting that those two, couple of names that we're expecting are working together, and they were definitely working together on the racetrack, even if they weren't behind the scenes. Both of them have now had a warning for that running down and through the pit lane.
Yeah, they both had warnings for that, and yeah, you just got to be careful with that kind of stuff because it's little things like that that can easily take you out of contention for the race win or for even having a shot at it. So it's just, you've got to pay attention to all those little details whenever you're running one of these races that's so well organized like this. You've got admins watching your every move, so you've really got to be picture perfect in all scenarios. You can't relax going down the pit lane and just don't worry about a rule, because at the end of the day, you get a penalty for it and you're out of contention for the race win.
And Jack, I think it was pretty much a full fuel run since we've last talked about it, so I'm going to mention it once again, that Classic IndyCar Series Indianapolis 500 we had a few weeks back. If drivers were using that as sort of a test bench and maybe a warm-up for this event, and even if they weren't 100% using it as a warm-up, you're likely going to get some practice, maybe get in tune a little bit, even if it's a different car and all the like. I don't think you would have taken much from that Classic IndyCar Series Indy 500, considering we had one green flag stop in 200 laps of that race. And now here we are 75 laps into this one, and everyone's been down onto pit road under green twice already.
Yeah, we've ran green since the drop of the green flag in this one. In the Classic IndyCar Series, Indianapolis 500 didn't quite have that. We did have a few cautions throughout that 500-mile race. One driver who's done a very short series or short season in that series this year is Henry Bennett, currently running up in the 3rd position of this event. He came back for the Indianapolis 500 for the Classic IndyCar Series. Ran pretty well in that race in the 007, Randy. Of course, being the reigning champion in that one, he wanted to come and try and win the Indianapolis 500. There's none of the top 3 from that race in this event today. That was, of course, Robert Grosser, Lucas Laville, and the driver of TM Hauser. They got the top 3 all from Logical Vortex Sim Racing. They haven't decided to run at this event today. Some of the guys that we see in the mid-pack in the CIS, however, they are running here today.
See Lucas Laville in the chat, he's mentioning it, saying it's not the same beast. One of the things, and Jack, I'm going to stay with you on this, that was actually really interesting about this event is the qualifying format. Well, you see every car out there is the Dallara IR18. That's the chassis that all the fastest guys pretty much went to because it is the fastest chassis on the sim here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Michele Constantini is dealing with lap traffic, and we'll talk about the gap he's opened over Christopher in a moment. But, Jack, all 3 cars, all 3 Indy cars on the iRacing service were open to drivers for you to utilize. That means the Dallara IR05, the Dallara DW12, and then this car, the Dallara IR18. No one ended up making it in, but I do know that those Vortex drivers, because they've had such a long season, they thought for fun they would just attempt to qualify and see how they would do in the IR05. They had no expectations of making the race, which is a little bit of a bummer. It's weird to be doing an Indy 500 and not have a single Vortex car in the field. But I think it's just interesting to me, and it's definitely a fun thing for them that we're going to support this event even if we're unlikely to make it, because I think they've done so much work with the old car that they really didn't have much worked up for this new IR18.
I'm just looking at some information that I know from the Classic IndyCar Series. Robert Grosser, one of the drivers who finished in the top 3 of their Indy 500 2 weeks ago, he did try to qualify an IR05 for this race. He was P62, and I believe he was the fastest one. So clearly that old chassis being not entirely competitive. The DW12, I believe there were some up in the 40s in the qualifying positions, so they were close. They aren't that much slower than these IR18s, but they weren't quite there in the terms of the pace, meaning that this whole field is this Dallara IR18, the latest of the IndyCar chassis.
Thing is, though, Tyler, that even if they're not much slower, the IR05, you know, yeah, you can probably stand next to the racetrack and you can probably watch them whiz by and you probably get pretty much the same visceral experience. However, when you're actually doing it on the timing with the stopwatch, that extra maybe second, half a second a lap, it's just an impossible margin for that car to really be able to manage with how competitive this group is.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, a second would have put you, obviously, way down the order. I mean, with the whole field being separated by 8/100ths of a second, if you're losing a second a lap, that's a lot to overcome by driving, and it's really an impossible gap to overcome by driving. So, and it's also just the little things, like the IR18 having the weight jacker and other things like that can really help out these newer chassis. And like you said, that little bit of time that you lose in that car is just cost you way too much.
Yeah, the Dallara IR05 as well, having those in-car tools that you can work with, but definitely more modern set of aero on these new cars. Once again, we're starting to see a sort of a lead group and a secondary group kind of form. Leading group right now is, of course, Michele Constantini, Christopher, Henry Bennett, and I'd even log both Adam Blocker and Marco Aurelio Brazil inside of that top 5. That top 5 group separated by 2 seconds on the racetrack. Second train of race cars. It's actually a big train of purple race cars here, Jack. Purple car of Josh Shin, purple car of Wilson Neto, and if you squint really hard and maybe get drunk, you can say Jeff Drake's pink car is purple as well.
Yes, just slightly lighter is Jeff Drake's number 4 machine. Of course, one of those drivers driving under the Team Talent banner here today. Josh Chin has managed to pull away just a little bit. Wilson Neto seems to have calmed his car down a little bit more, so the struggles that he was having, well, those laps, just a few laps ago, seems to have gone. He's found himself just that little bit of clean air that he needed. It's not brilliant, but it's enough for that 421 to just be functioning enough as they come across the yard of bricks for what is going to be starting lap number 83.
So 83 laps into this event already, and they've all been green, and that means we're already We're already past, of course, 2 rounds of pit stops, and we're already heading into the 3rd one. But Tyler, this race is just screaming by for an Indy 500. I know that, like Jack and I have mentioned it, the one we did. What was the run time for the Classic race, Jack?
It's about 2.25 hours.
About 2.25 hours. We're approaching halfway already, and now the elapsed time in the sim is going to show us 1 hour and 6 minutes. But of course, that's counting the 3 laps of pacing that they had to get the field set. That took better part of 10 minutes. We're only about 10 laps out from half distance, and we're not even at the 1 hour mark yet.
Yeah, and that just shows how clean this race has been. I mean, there has not been a single caution flag this entire race thus far, and really not many people have crashed. We've seen a few drivers have some issues way early on, but other than that, we really haven't had a whole lot of drivers that have had any major incidents which have brought out a caution flag, which is definitely a big help in that. You're not having drivers wrecking every 2 laps. Really helps with how long you can do under green flag. And right now we're on a very, very long green flag run. So this is really the test of endurance here. It's the test of how well the cars perform over really long distances. And if you didn't set up your car to run these really long stints, then you're really going to be struggling here.
And talking about trends and teams working together and teams having success here, Jack, I'm just going through it. P2, P3, P4, Chris Stouffer, Power Slide Motorsports, Henry Bennett, Power Slide Motorsports, Adam Blocker, Power Slide Motorsports. Those guys have found their way to the head of the field, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, trying to track down, though, this man, Michele Constantini, with Apex Racing Team with Indy 500 Group. I think Michele's definitely been the dominant driver of the first half of this race. He's been the one who was challenging the likes of Neto and Brazil early on when they were the duo leading the field. And he's been basically the only car. He's been perfect down pit road 2 times already, and he's been perfect out there on the racetrack. So he's got the 3 musketeers of Power Slide behind him that are wanting to put him in the rear view. So he's going to have a lot of work to do when they eventually get to him.
And this is something that we have seen from Michele before. He is very dominant. He can get himself to the front of the field, and he can just drive off into the distance. A very talented driver is this Italian, and clearly showing that today as he crosses the yard of bricks once again. The lap times last time around, well, he was quicker than all of the drivers behind him. So Power Slide Motorsports are clearly trying, but their tyres may be dropping off towards the end of the stint. Michele Constantini's been out there 25 laps. The 3 Power Slide Motorsports drivers all be having slightly newer tyres by about 2 or 3 laps. So Constantini still dominating. The lap times have dropped off, but he had the fastest lap time of anyone out on the racing surface last time around.
Michele Constantini is reeling in this man right there. We saw the graphic up on screen. Dakota DeCenzo, who is currently 1 lap down in the 29th position. And what a frustrating situation, Tyler. Normally in one of these races, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect about a caution a stint, which is over the course of a 500-mile race, isn't really that extreme. These guys that had some problems early, maybe they had an issue on pit road, maybe they had a bit of a loose moment out there on the racetrack that we didn't see. They were probably like, okay, we're going to go a lap down early. It's actually Dakota's going to take to the escape road to let the faster traffic through. They're probably like, okay, I'm going to cycle down. I may lose a lap here, but I can likely make a strategy call when we get a caution and get that lead lap back. I'll be off cycle, but I'll at least be on the lead lap and maybe get it back. How frustrating it must be for these guys to then have this race just go green for this long and make it entirely impossible for you to get that that lead lap status back. So, Dakota DeCenzo was the most recent to go a 2nd lap down. Andres Eek is up next, and then your pole sitter Young O at risk of going down 2 laps in the opening 100-lap salvo.
Yeah, and that just shows how ruthless this race really is. Whenever you kind of plan on possibly having a caution flag per stint, which, like you said, is really not out of the question. It's something that we have definitely seen in the past. So it's difficult for you. Whenever you've got, as a driver, really just to keep your head in the game and hope that you get a caution flag here later on in the race. We're 90 laps in at this point, and we have just about 110 laps left. So there's still a long time left to go for these drivers to get a caution flag, but the way it's looking so far, it's not looking like there's going to be one coming out anytime soon.
And we're going to shift the cameras rearward for a little bit, and we're going to point them at this man. We saw him at the end of the last pit stop cycle. And Jack, the reason I'm doing this is because I think I love Joe Branch's strategy just a little bit. His in-lap last trip around the racetrack was lap 36. Or excuse me, that would have been his out lap. He came down pit road on lap 70, so that would have been a 33, 34 lap stint, depending on how you count it up with the start-finish line and whatnot. But 34 laps, pretty much for Joe Branch. You compare that to Michele Constantini, has done 30, and everyone else was sort of in 30 to 32. Actually, we see cars down on pit road. Speak of the devil, and you see more turning off behind Joe Branch as well. Joe may not have the outright speed here, but if with this race having the trend of going green and staying green, I love a race car that can go an extra 3 or 4 laps compared to the cars that are even 20 seconds out in front of it, because I think there's a very real likelihood that Joe can cut out a large percentage of a fuel fill when he eventually does, when the final pit stops eventually end up cycling through. And of course it puts you in a great situation should a yellow happen during the pit lane sequence. Suddenly you jump from 16th where Joe currently sits all the way up to the race lead.
And we have got the race leader down onto the pit lane. By the looks of things, people are doing 30 lap stints this time. So it is interesting to see that some of these drivers are going slightly shorter on this fuel stint with the fuel. But Joe Branch very much playing the long game, currently sitting down in 16th. He started 14th, so he's dropped a couple of positions on where he started. He has just got himself up into 15th, but that's because some of the guys around him are coming down onto the pit lane. Michele Constantini is out and away. He's back out onto the racing surface, and he did a pit stop of 9.6 seconds. That's full fuel and 4 tyres for your race leader. Back out and away in the 66.
Chris Stouffer cycling on the race lead. Because of that, he's gone by that pit entry one extra time. Expect these power slide teammates, Tyler, of Stouffer, Bennett, and Blocker. I think they're going to work together here to try to manage this as they work through turn 3. Blocker a little bit wide at the apex of 3, but you got so much aero on this race setup that it's not going to be too much of an issue. Let's see if these guys come down pit road, because I think they're going to come down together. Answer's going to be no. They're going to go another lap.
Yeah, so they're going to go another lap on this stint, so they're really stretching this stint out to see how far they can get it on the fuel. This could really help you later on in the race. We were talking about this just a bit earlier, with the difference of having to take 3/4 of a tank of fuel or just do a splash and dash. So really extending these stints as long as possible and trying to get that, if you do have to make an extra pit stop, down to as low a fuel as possible is really going to be beneficial for you late in on the race. If you're looking to take the race win, and if it's something where it's going to be close on fuel, having that ability to possibly take just that little bit of fuel and not lose too much, because your competitor has to take a whole lot more than you.
Here comes the first driver who's going to blink. It's going to be this man, Chris Stouffer. You see he's already cycling in a third on the live timing. Of course, the positions update very quickly here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And you see about 4 more cars in the background. I think I see Chris Demerit in that group. I see a Sadie car as well in the mix. That's Bradley Walters, Liam Quinn, I think as well as someone else. I didn't catch who it was.
It's Riley Thompson.
So Riley Thompson back on towards pit road as well. So one of the power slide cars peels on towards pit road. Henry Bennett going to be next, or are they going to go one at a time per lap? Or let's see as these drivers are going to hit pit road simultaneously, as we are 6 laps out from halfway here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Indeed, Henry Bennett will wait 1 extra lap, then he'll get the call to come down pit road. I have a sneaking suspicion here, Jack, that Adam Blocker is going to be down pit road this time.
I would say the same, because Adam Blocker went 1 lap longer than Henry Bennett on the last stint. And again, it looks to be happening again. 32 laps from Henry Bennett this time as he is down onto the pit lane. You've got to stay far right in that fast lane on this pit lane as Henry Bennett into his pit box. He's locked all 4 tyres, Randy, and he's hit it head on with his nose. There is going to be damage to the 007.
Replay up. This is the first time we've seen one of your race-leading cars really get into drama, and it happened where it oh so frequently does, is on pit road. You see him traveling down the far right-hand side of the pit box, and I'll talk about that in a moment because that might be relevant. We see him running down towards the pit box. He comes in, and he just gets that left front on the concrete there, Tyler, and he just slams that nose into the inside retaining wall. And I think unless we get a timely yellow for Henry Bennett that resets the field and maybe allows him to get some repairs, I think that could be the end of Henry Bennett's open wheels Indy 500 chances of a win.
Yeah, that certainly could be. It was just a slight mistake like that is all it takes to completely take you out of the race contention. We were talking about this earlier, just the littlest mistakes here can cost you so much. And that's one of the things that makes the Indianapolis 500 such a special event to win, is that you pretty much have to be picture perfect for the entire event if you want to even have a chance at winning this race. So it is definitely probably the hardest race on the entire iRacing schedule for the special events, and really probably one of the hardest races in the world to win.
So pit stop sequences once again. Jeff Drake was one of the final cars to not yet come down pit road. He has now left it to this man, Jack. We just talked about him right as the pit lane sequence started. Joe Branch, last to come down pit road again, and he cycles back to the race lead once again. As he streams down the back straightaway, you see a bunch of traffic behind him. Be interesting to see how long he goes. Again, his in-lap was lap 70, technically rejoined the racetrack on lap number 71. So it's going to be interesting to see. This will be currently working lap 29. He might have an extra 3 or 4 laps even he can work with, and that's the thing. The further you go in this race, you know, if you can go an extra 3 laps on fuel compared to everyone else, it's not going to stay stable. It'll be 3 laps longer you're going in comparison in terms of total time on the racetrack. But let's say you start at lap 0 and it's 30-33, then it's going to be 60-66, then it's going to be 90-99. So it's going to be probably better part of a 4 to 5 lap difference for Joe Branch this time. As we got a yellow, and I mentioned it, Joe Branch, your race leader at the time of the caution.
And that was for the number 43 machine, Dakota DiCenzo. He's lost his front wing. He's had an accident on the main straight off of turn number 4. This is quite a large one. The first caution of the race as we get close to the 50% marker.
So Total Downforce Racing with Team Talent, the group. I see Team Talent's Liam Quinn down there, and Dakota able to just keep it off that driver on the inside, and Dakota actually jumped the pit wall on the inside. Luckily, it's virtual crew members only here on the iRacing service, but who is that in the 144? I believe that's Christopher Demerit, and indeed it was. We'll point the camera at him because he was very close, Tyler, to getting caught up in an incident that would have been no fault of his own.
Yeah, that was very, very close there for Christopher Demerit, and that was just such a small mistake. I mean, Dakota DiCenzo just gets up into the outside wall and just slams it once again into the inside pit wall, up over the concrete wall in the pit lane, and that is going to be his day done here. So really, this is actually working out quite well here for Joe Branch. He has a pretty good strategy, and I wouldn't be surprised if most of the field jumps down this time, so maybe Joe Branch has a absolutely golden strategy.
And actually, I was about to ask you this here, Jack. Do you think this is a timely caution for Joe Branch? Because I would think with a huge amount of the cars currently out there on the running order, they've just come down pit road. Do you think they come down pit road again?
I'm not sure. For Joe Branch, it could go one way or another. Everyone has to pit for this to be the perfect caution for him. He's got to pit this time, but looking behind him, look at the cars coming down onto the pit lane. We're seeing some split strategies here from drivers. Michele Constantini, it looks as though from your top 10, the only drivers who haven't come down onto the pit, Josh Chin, Jeff Drake, and Liam Quinn. So the majority of your top 10 actually coming down onto the field. It's a very half-and-half strategy with this caution as to whether you pit or not. So we're going to see some really quick guys coming up through the field, the likes of Michele Constantini, the likes of Christopher, Jeff Drake as well. He stayed out onto the circuit, so ignore me. Wilson Neto as well, another driver down onto the pit lane for that 421. He's got to now contend with dirty air, something we've seen these Brazilian drivers struggle with today here, Randy.
Now, there was one little short thing for Joe Branch, of course, here, Jack, which because he had to take a full fuel load, a couple of cars were able to jump out ahead of him, even though he came in ahead of them. Michele Constantini is sort of the obvious one. I'll bring the pit stop times up to kind of show it. Because Michele only needed, because he just come down pit road, only needed a little bit to top up the tanks. He was able to get away with a 7.6 second pit stop. Joe Branch, meanwhile, 9.7 to get the thing filled up. Thing is, though, Jack, this really didn't pan out as much as well for Joe as I think he would have liked. He's on the same sort of cycle now as a number of cars that were leading, of course, the likes of Chris Dover, Michele Constantini as well. So of those cars that pit that were leaders, he is third amongst them, but he's going to line up, I believe it's 15th on the racetrack when timing eventually updates. So he's not going to gain much track position, but but he is going to be around a number of cars that were out at the head of the field. You also see Marco Brazil just behind him as well. And once the timing updates, when they cross start finish, I believe the race leading car will be this man right here, the 2018 iRacing.com Indy 500 champ, Joshua Chin, and I think just behind him, actually no, I take that back, that's Young O. But number of cars as well just going to miss out on getting their lap back. Young's actually going to come down pit road, take the opportunity to fill up because of that. But Josh Shin's going to be cycled as your leader, and I think Jeff Drake should be P2.
It'll be Josh Chin leading, Jeff Drake P2, Liam Quinn P3. So that's your top three.
We've exchanged a power slide 1, 2, 3 for a team talent 1, 2, 3.
We have indeed, by the looks of things. Christopher Merritt is in 4th, Rick Music's 5th. Simon Briant, a name we haven't mentioned yet so far, he's made his way into 6th. Silvio Sanchez 7th. Bradley Walters 8th. Austin Espartee, who had an awful start to this event, all of a sudden now poking his head into the top 10 along with John Downing. So this caution for some drivers really has changed their race. Austin Espartee, a very fast driver in these Indy cars, really hasn't had a lot of luck so far here today, Randy. So now he's in the top 10. Could we see something from that number 7 machine?
I definitely think it's possible from the 7 of Austin Espartee. As we look down the running order of your top 10 cars, and as you can see, there's a lot of representation from team talent. Actually, it's basically the top 10 right now, Jack, is basically team talent and Sadie Sim Autosport. I believe there's 4 cars from each, and then you have Christopher Demerit from Team Broken Arrow, and you have Silvio Roberto Sanchez from Corinthians Rally Team. Those are the top 10 cars. So 4 from team talent, 4 from Sadie Sim Autosport, but the team talent machines, they take up the first 3 positions, and that's going to be interesting. It's almost an inverse from what we saw as well in the Classic IndyCar Series Indy 500. The team talent guys made a weird pit stop under caution that Jack and I didn't understand, and they handed 1, 2, 3 to Vortex with about 30 laps to go in the race. This time it flip-flops, everyone else pits, and team talent will be 1, 2, 3 as they come back for the restart. So for the first time here tonight, we'll be restarting this event single file just past halfway. 102 laps, 101 laps will be scored complete when they cross the yard of bricks. There will be 98 laps to go here for Joshua Chin as we're back to green flag racing.
Back to green flag racing we go. The single file start we've been used to seeing in IndyCar racing. No side-by-side into turn number 1 by the looks of things. So everyone seeming to be nice and safety through turn number 1. And now for the team talent guys in P1, 2 and 3. They've got to work together, get themselves away from Christopher Demerit and the pack behind.
So here we go. They're going to start leapfrogging. Jeff Drake's going to look up the inside of Josh Shin into turn 3. He'll get him clear. So Josh will cycle into P2. Liam stuck in 3rd. I mentioned these purple cars a little bit ago, although Wilson Neto was part of that group at the time. Now Liam Quinn is the 3rd purple car you have on screen, just behind Christopher Demerit. He won the iRacing Indy 500, of course. I believe it was in 2017 as it worked down the front straightaway and in towards turn 1. You also have Rick Music out there. Been a pole sitter for the iRacing Indy 500 in the past. So a lot of successful names for iRacing's biggest race at the head of the field right now, Tyler.
Yeah, there is some really big names up to the head of the field. There's a little bit of a gap once you get out of the back of this first long train there. Back to Michele Constantini, who was your race leader here for such a long time in this race. So this is, I think, going to be a real test here for the ART driver to see how he can move himself back up through the field and see if he can get himself back to the point.
So you go your top 2 cycling once again. You see that number 93 car of, 93 car of Josh Shin cycle to the left-hand side. He'll go back to the lead as they work through turn 1. As you see those Sadie Sim Autosport cars lined up, and they're nearly lined up 3 strong. Right now it's just Silvio Roberto Sanchez separating the 3 of them. Rick Music and Simon Bryant ahead of Silvio, and behind it's Bradley Walters. Bradley has been a force to be reckoned with in these cars as well, as we watch Austin Espartee and John Downing as well. And something to take note of here, Jack, is that the likes of the cars that were ahead of Joe Branch before that caution, Michele Costantini, Chris Stouffer, they're starting to open up a gap over this man of Joe Branch, who we know has the best fuel economy of all cars in the race thus far, but he doesn't seem to have the speed to keep up to those cars that he just got the track position to try and work with.
You can see that group, which involves the former race leader Michele Constantini, 2 wide into turn 1. They're clearly wanting to try and catch up to this leading group. There is about a second between the driver of Chris Stouffer at the head of this group and the driver of John Downing at the back of the lead group, as the lead is changing again. You'll see it at the top of your screens, ladies and gentlemen, with Jeff Drake and Josh Chin swapping that P1, P2. They want to keep the draft as good as possible. They want to keep the speed as high as possible to try and keep everyone away. But now the gap between John Downing and Christopher is down to less than a second. The draft is going to become stronger and stronger for Chris and McKaylee. Now they've got their work cut out to get themselves back to the lead of this race.
Yeah, the draft is going to get powerful, and not only that, Tyler, but the cars they're about to be getting to are going to be faster and faster than the cars that they've been dealing with. Those cars they just got by are sort of at the slower end of what I would define are competitive cars. Those guys could potentially get their way up into the top X spots, but it's not entirely that likely. Now they're starting to get into cars that I think if you were to cycle them at the head of the field, they could probably stay there. Because of that, it's going to be much slower going for them as they work through. Puff of smoke off of somebody there off of turn 4. Not sure what that was. May have actually just been a draft flare, so apologies for that. But I thought someone had blown a motor for a moment. Seems like everyone's still good and still going strong out there. But now for these guys, Michele Constantini, Marco Brazil, Adam Blocker as well, this is where it's going to get really difficult for them, Tyler, to start running their way through the field.
Yeah, this is exactly when it's going to show how good of a race car they have and how good they really are here on race pace. It's all about how well you can get through the traffic in these sort of situations. Right now, Christopher seems to have a really good race car in that dirty air. And Michele Constantini seems to like it a bit more whenever he's out in the lead. So at the moment, both of these guys still moving up through the field nicely, but it's going to get more difficult as they move up higher in the drivers.
See Austin Espetin not giving Michele Constantini an inch either, as we'll cycle back out to the race lead in the team talent cars of Chin, Drake, and Quinn. They still line up single file, though as I say that, Jeff Drake will cut to the inside. He's going to take that race lead away from Josh Chin. Christopher DeMeritt still sits in the 4th spot, but he's got another trio behind him of Rick Musing, Simon Bryant, and Bradley Walters able to get around Silvio Sanchez here, Jack. So it's going to be team talent 1, 2, 3, a Broken Arrow solo man, and then Music Bryant and Walters 5, 6, and 7. So right now, DeMeritt, he's the cream filling inside of the 3-teammate Oreo at the moment.
And for DeMeritt, that's going to be a bit of an awkward situation for him to be in. His teammate, he's making his way up through the field in the form of Christopher. However, his progress is going to be slow for DeMeritt. He's got to sit tight, wait for a little bit of backup, but keep an eye out from behind. He's got 3 teammates really trying to get himself past Rick Music and Simon Bryant in the 6 and the 22, clearly trying to work together to make their way up through the field just that little bit more as they come across the yard of bricks. Another 10 laps are complete, and we are down to 90 to go here at Indianapolis.
And I need to start talking about it. The fact that these cars opted to come out, Jack, is very, very relevant. And I'm going to use Joshua Chin as sort of my marker. Last time he came down pit road was lap number 98. So about 16 laps ago. Of course, a big chunk of that would have been the caution lap, so he would have saved a little bit of fuel. But he's kind of nearing the midway point of the fuel run already. Take that in comparison to, we'll go to this man who ended up coming down pit road, Michele Constantini. He's basically been green since the drop of the green flag, only about 8 laps, 7 laps into this run. So about an 8 to 9 lap difference here, Tyler, for these guys on the strategy of the cars that ended up coming down pit road versus the cars that stayed out. That could be very, very important when we get deeper into this race, if there's not a point that these guys can equalize and get on the same cycle.
Yeah, it certainly could be, but in the meantime there, Christopher has pounded the wall out of turn number 4, and he is losing a lot of time here, so Christopher really just hurt his chances at winning, and right now he is incredibly slow as they head through 3 and 4.
We're going to rewind the cameras back a little bit further. You saw the tail end of the incident there for this man, Christopher, and you see he's just into that outside wall. That may not look like a hard hit, but trust me, it feels like a hard hit when you're behind the wheel of these virtual race cars. We'll rewind the cameras back a little bit once again so you can see it from this onboard shot. And actually, we're going to lose him somehow, but Christopher is now going to be trying to deal with this here, Jack, and that's pretty much heartbreak, I think, for you to hit that wall like that, and especially this late in the race when you've had so much green flag running, so much being out there on the racetrack in traffic, actively fighting with people. To have a mistake like that potentially drop you out of the event is going to be a complete killer for him.
And Chris was really pushing. I thought something was wrong because I could see on my timing screens Michele Constantini get himself past. So clearly for Christopher, something went wrong with that number 13 machine. On the next lap by, he almost did it again. The car got loose off of turn number 4, so no visible damage by the looks of things to the 13. However, clearly a little bit of mentality has been taken away from the driver Christopher. A little bit of confidence knocked. He's got to take himself a few laps, calm himself back down again, get himself back into his rhythm so he can pick that pace back up.
Jeff Drake back to the race lead over Joshua Chin. At the moment, Liam Quinn still sits third. Christopher Demerit still in fourth. Michele Constantini will watch him as he's reeling in Silvio Roberto Sanchez. And we talked about it earlier in the race here, Tyler, excuse me. It was the Brazilians of Wilson Neto and Marco Brazil. They were the ones to watch at the head of the field. Silvio Sanchez, of course, the third Brazilian in the field. He's been he's not one we've talked about much. He started this race, of course, on the final row of the 11-row field. He started in the 32nd spot. He currently finds himself 8th with Michele Constantini bearing down on him. So right now, Silvio Sanchez, while he was the worst starting car of the Brazilians, he's got himself and is currently the best running one by a pretty clear margin, as actually Michele is able to make short work of him. And I think if I recall correctly, I think Silvio may have been one of the most consistent of the Brazilians that we saw in the month of May as well. So Silvio doing very well here at the Speedway, not only this month, but this year.
Yeah, he certainly has been, and he, like you said, was the lowest starting Brazilian and now is the highest current running Brazilian. The other ones have dropped down the order quite a bit. Marco Brazil, the closest one to him, down in 15th, and then Wilson Neto down in 20th. So the Brazilians seem to have some issues here other than Silvio Sanchez. He's the only one who's really been able to keep that car, or get that car up to the front and keep it there.
Yep, and Silvio has not had the speed the other two had as well. We saw, of course, in the opening stint that both Marco Brazil as well as Wilson Neto were able to be up at the head of the field. We've not yet seen Silvio Sanchez really have race-leading pace just yet, as your top two starting to open the gap here over the third-place running car. It seems like that 13 talent machine here, Jack, of Liam Quinn, not quite having the speed compared to the two in front of him of Josh Chin and Jeff Drake.
No, the 44 has dropped back just a little bit as Liam Quinn now 0.6 of a second between himself and his teammate of Jeff Drake. He has still got about half a second back to Christopher Demerit, so he's sort of on a little bit of his own at the moment is Liam Quinn, and hopefully we'll see the pace pick up just a little bit, but he is running slower laps than those around him, clearly struggling just a little bit as we head on to the 24th lap of his stint. Those tyres are also going to be starting to go away, so maybe a little bit higher tyre wear for the 44 is why we are seeing this slight drop-off of pace.
And it's important that he mentions that, Tyler, the fact that those guys are on lap number 24, thereabouts of their stint. All of the team talent cars, I think, came down at the same time. We'll cycle through, showing in lap of Josh Chin, lap number 98. Let's check out Jeff Drake. Last time he came down pit road, lap number 100. And then Liam Quinn, of course, 24 laps into the race. I could do the math in my head, but I'm bad. Lap number 97. So all those guys in kind of about the same window, maybe a 3 or 4 lap difference depending on when they decided to come down pit road. But overall, that's basically when they did, come down pit road. Now, of course, those handful of caution laps that we had, they would have saved maybe maybe 2 or 3 laps of fuel under that pit road sequence. So instead of going 30 laps, you're probably going to go 33, 34 this time. But there's still going to be, again, like we talked about, 10 or so laps down pit road sooner than all the cars that we saw actually take the option to come down pit road, which actually ended up being the bulk of the field. I think we expected more guys to stay out, but in reality, the choice that most of the field went with was to come down pit road and top up.
I think that was what the majority of the field did. That is because I think they wanted to get on those fresh tires and get the fuel in the car. They wanted to kind of stick on the strategy that most of the field was running so that they're on an equal playing field. But those team talent guys out in the lead, they kind of went for the different strategy as everyone else did. And it's working out for them right now, but if they're going to be able to keep that throughout this race, that is going to be the real test of time for that strategy, because if they're able to stick up into the lead, then that's going to be great for them. But if they kind of fall back into the clutches of the midfield and they're really not able to move back forward again, then that strategy could have really bit them.
We somehow miss a caution, as we missed this actually on the cameras. Wilson Neto ended up going around and had a spin. We'll get another look at that. Apologies for the camera freaking out. as I will look to find Wilson Neto as soon as possible. There he is, and of course I find him as the spin's already happened. But I want to ride on board actually with the car that was behind him, because that's the car that got into him. We'll see what Andrew Wood saw, but regardless of what Andrew Wood saw, everyone's seen now the 421 of Wilson Neto go around, and of course on the camera angle, the producer, who is me, chooses. Couldn't see a dang thing, could you? So we'll watch this one here just to check and see. But we talk about the Brazilians falling down and not having the night go as they would have liked, Jack, and that's another one who's not only was he going the wrong way, but the Brazilians' race going the wrong way there. Yeah, you can see on the replay that you're seeing now, ladies and gentlemen, side by side through turn number 2, and as Andrew Wood came up the racetrack, there was contact with himself and Wilson Neto. Could have been avoided by a little lift from Andrew, but it was the slightest of touches that sent Wilson round, and the Brazilians again still not having a great night. He is still on the lead lap, ladies and gentlemen, so if we do get another caution, he can get himself to the rear of the field nice and easily. However, he is a long way down the field, currently running in 25th position, 20 seconds down on your race leader. And that's the big thing with these race cars, Tyler, is that they are so sensitive. Not only is it just the damage, like we saw, I believe it was Chris Stouffer a number of laps ago, hit that outside wall off of turn 4, and he's slowly been cycling down the running order. That hit didn't kill the car in so much respect, but it's definitely affecting the speed, and we're not seeing Stouffer be nearly as competitive as we saw a little bit earlier on in the event. But it's not just that, but they're just so sensitive to touch because of the limit to adhesion and how much stress the tires are already under. You're doing such high speeds, and the cars are working so hard to stay stuck to the racetrack that any little touch that gets them upset, it's just such a thin line, and any little touch will just basically send the car around. And Neto's, I think, really lucky that he didn't pound the wall and end the race. I saw a car down on pit road.
Yeah, I saw another car down on pit road as well. I'm not quite sure who that was. But like you were saying, though, the tiniest little touch, these guys are on the limit of what the tires will allow them to do. So if you get that little bit over the limit, then it's just going to send you around, or it's going to send you up into the outside wall. So it's a fine line that you've got to work on, how hard you can push everything, and whenever you do make contact with the wall or make contact with anything, it's going to cost you a whole lot.
Yeah, that it definitely is, as your team talent drivers will once again, of course, cycle past pit lane. Again, the big talking point for them at the moment is when they ended up making their pit stop sequence under green flag laps just before that yellow flag came out. So for these guys, are going to work themselves around. And for a couple of these guys, Jack, and I haven't mentioned it as much, I don't think the difference is going to be as severe. Most notably, I'm looking at Jeff Drake. He came down on towards pit road on lap number 100. His out lap was lap 101, and the caution lap was lap 102. So compared to everyone else who pit, Jeff Drake really isn't on that much of a different cycle, because he only did 1 lap at speed. He may have a 1 to 2 lap differential. I think it's Josh Chin and I think Liam Quinn, I think, are the big losers when you consider that Josh came down on lap number 98 and he ran 3 or 4 laps under green. And you look at Liam Quinn, and like we mentioned earlier, he came down even earlier on lap number 97. Those are the 2 cars that I think are in a really bad situation with fuel at the moment. So Austin Esparti has already been down to make his 4th scheduled stop of the race so far. So that was the car we saw. Yeah, that was the car we saw. He did 32 laps. Now, he didn't box under that caution, so he stayed out. So that's the kind of fuel mileage we could see from these guys. So Liam Quinn, he stayed out. He's going to go for 33 because he's now done 32. So has Christopher Demerit. Chin has now done 31. Jeff Drake has done 29. So we are very close to this next round of pit stops from these front 3. Expect Jeff Drake to stay out that few laps longer just because he stayed out the few laps longer last time around. Yeah, I definitely think you're right about that. I'm just having a look, and he actually came down pit road very early, Tyler. His in-lap was lap number 93. So Austin Esparti not been getting great fuel economy in that race car. Of course, it's important to note, it's not just the fuel economy that maybe drivers are really siding on. We talked about it in qualifying over the course of the 4-lap runs. Actually, I'm going to sidetrack myself. Josh Chin on towards pit road for his scheduled pit stop. He will scroll down at pit road speeds. He will be the the second of leading trio to come down pit road after Liam Quinn. Actually, no, Liam pit with him. So those 2 cars, they pit at the same time. And I think I see other team talent cars in the background as well. I think that's Andrew Wood. Indeed it was, as well as the Sadie Simsport car of David Adams. on pit road. So Team Talent coming down pit road in a big way right now, Tyler.
Yeah, Team Talent choosing to come down with quite a few of their drivers. A couple of them still out. Just Jeff Drake. And he will actually dive into the pit lane this time. Christopher DeMerit as well into the pit lane. Rick Music will stay out. Simon Bryant will stay out. Bradley Walters in as well. Michele Constantini stays out. He did pit under that caution flag period, so we won't see him in for a few more laps. But now, those Team Talent guys choosing to come into pit lane within a lap of each other.
And these Sadie Sim Autosport drivers here, Jack, we didn't talk about them as much because they've not really been at the head of the field, but now they run 1-2 with the pit stop sequence. They actually came down pit road in a very similar time frame as the Team Talent guys that we've just been talking about. So the fact that we've not seen all three of them come down pit road at once tells me that this group is getting very good fuel economy. Rick Music, his in-lap before the pit stop sequence was, before the caution, lap number 98. Simon Bryant, his in-lap was lap number 100, I believe. So both Rick Music and Simon Bryant, they're basically were sort of in the same boat as the likes of Jeff Drake and a couple of those other Team Talent guys that pit on the later end of things right before the yellow. These guys can stay out here, I think, for a while more on the fuel and probably be okay. Rick Music, though, definitely, with him coming down on lap number 98, a couple of your Team Talent guys I mentioned, they came down pit road on lap number 98. Rick's getting great fuel economy and definitely great drivability out of this race car as he'll come down pit road now on lap 130.
Now, Rick Music has done 35 laps on this stint. Simon Bryant is now going on to... Including the yellow. So Simon Bryant is in the same situation. He's now going on to his 34th lap. Michele Constantini pitted under the yellow. He's now on his 31st. I think Michele's going to follow Simon down onto the pit lane. It's all about when do we see Simon onto the pit lane. I think it's going to be this time round, so it will be the same length. It will be one lap shorter than Rick Music, I feel. If not, he is going to go for that 35. That is the longest stint we've seen so far in this race, is 35 laps from Rick Music.
The 35 laps, and like I said, it is important to remember that is with the caution. That said, though, I know that is oftentimes we see kind of 36 laps, Tyler, here at the Speedway quite frequently. I think that expected fuel run has gone down a little bit, though. But 70 laps to go. If you can do 35 laps under green, you can potentially make it to the end of this race on one more stop. And actually thinking about that a little bit here, Tyler, these Team Talent guys really didn't get the strategy right, because really you don't have to go that much further to get to the point where you only have to do 32, 33 laps to get to the end of the motor race on one stop. I'm trying to think if there's any way that Michele Constantini can maybe make it. Of course, they came out of pit road with the yellow, so lap number 106 would have been their first lap at speed. So they need to go 32 laps. That would put them... What? My math is bad. Is there any way you think they can stretch it to the end on one stop? There's Tyler?
It would definitely be difficult to do, but I just think it's a little bit too far out for them. I just don't think that they're going to be able to stretch that to the point of being able to do one more stop. I think everyone pretty much is stuck on doing this two-stop to the end of the race. Now, that is considering we do have all green flag laps to the end. Now, if we have a caution flag, it is for sure doable, I think, on one stop. But if we have green flag to the end, I believe that no one is safe enough to do one green flag pit stop.
See Adam Blocker coming down on towards pit road. He was one of the ones that hit pit lane during the caution sequence. So for him, he'd have to go 33 and 34 laps to make it to the end of the race on this tank of fuel, and that would be a big ask. Let's see what Michele Constantini is going to do this trip around the racetrack. That would be two sets of 33 lap stints, and I don't think we've seen Michele go that long all day. He's going to come down pit road, and I think he's just going to be short. Henry Bennett in the background is going to be coming down pit road again. And Jack, immediately who jumps to my mind as being in a very good situation here. We saw him in the mid-pack, but no, he's not getting the fuel economy Joe Branch pits. If he could have been getting an extra 3 or 4 laps this run from what we saw him get earlier on in the race, that would have been fantastic. I will say, though, if Joe Branch is coming down pit road considering the fuel economy he was getting, that may be a sign that all these other guys are pitting can make it to the end on one more stop.
Michele Constantini's just missed his pit box. He had to reverse just slightly. He's also managed to get away with a pit lane speeding penalty. He locked both front wheels as he came down onto the pit lane. He's really pushing that number 66 machine. He's back out and away and rejoining the racing surface now, ladies and gentlemen. But the Italian is pushing hard. He wants this race win. And with 65 laps to go at the yard of bricks, he can start to smell the milk.
So Adam Blocker is going to cycle in actually just behind him. And I don't know what Michele managed, because if he had a mistake on pit road there, Jack, he managed it, I think, as well as he possibly could, considering he comes out ahead of Mr. Blocker, did Michele Constantini. I will say, where in the world are, in comparison, oh, they've cycled back to the race lead now that my timing's updated. I was like, where in the world are the Team Talent cars? Well, they're in the race lead, Randy. Liam, Josh Chin, and Jeff Drake, they actually had very good pit stop sequence, Tyler. They were pretty much nose to tail when they came onto pit road. They're in a slightly different order, but they've stayed with each other through the pit stop sequence. And remember, they each came down on different laps. So these three managed the pit stop cycle perfectly from what you'd want your team to do. Liam and Josh have been leapfrogging this entire time.
Yeah, they certainly have really settled that into perfection there. They've got everything pretty much right where they want it. So it is Team Talent 1, 2, and 3 here. And Michele Constantini is 6 seconds. Last time by, what is he going to be this time? By 5.3 seconds off your race leader. So Michele Constantini, if he wants this race win, he's going to have to move himself up quickly to the front of this field. And really, I think these Team Talent guys, with the way they pulled off this strategy, it's going to be difficult. If they have to do another pit stop, then Michele has pretty much got it easy, I would say. But if they have worked this strategy to the point where they don't, then it's going to be a real big ask of the ART driver to try to get back to the lead.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be the situation. So your running order as it sits, and I don't know what it is this year here, Jack, with sets of 3 drivers for teams finding their way at the head of the field. We saw in the Classic IndyCar Series, it was 3 Vortex drivers at the head of the field, but we have 3 right now Team Talent drivers, Josh Chin, Liam Quinn, and Jeff Drake. They run 1, 2, 3. Sadie Sim Autosport, they run 4, 5, 6. Then you get Team Power Slides, Adam Blocker, and then you get Michele Constantini representing Apex, and then you get to the likes of Silvio, Roberto Sanchez, and Christopher DeBarrett. So 2 teams right now representing the top 6, and both of those teams were really good on pit road. The Team Talent guys are having a little bit of an advantage, I think, in speed compared to the Sadie guys through the pit stop sequence, but still great for both of those trios to come onto and off of pit road and still keep with one another.
And I think what we now need to see from Adam Blocker and Michele Constantini is those two working together. They can't fight each other at this point. They need to work together to get through the pack, get themselves past Rick Music, Bradley Walters, and Simon Bryant ahead, and get themselves up to this leading pack. Because, okay, they're gaining. It's now 4.5 seconds between Michele Constantini and Josh Chin in the lead, but it's still got to get past cars. Catching is one thing, passing is another. The great Murray Walker always used to say that at Indianapolis. That is so true.
So down the front straightaway goes this second group of Music, Walters, Bryant, Blocker, Constantini. Constantini is cycled in towards the back end of this group. And something to think about as well, Tyler, with the pit stops. If there's any way that these teams can make it to the end of the motor race on one more tank of fuel, those drivers that came down, of course, that pit under the caution and that came down more recently, they're going to have a slightly shorter fill than all the cars that the likes of the Team Talent group that had to pit first. And that's going to be very relevant, because 1 or 2 seconds that you can save on pit road is an enormous amount of time out there on the racetrack.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, 1 to 2 seconds on pit road can be upwards of, I think, around 4 or 5 seconds on the racetrack with how fast these guys are going. So that's a lot of time to be losing on pit road. But right now, these Team Talent guys out the front are dropping back to this group that runs behind them now. The Rick Music, who leads this, is now 3.4 seconds behind the race leader, and just about 3 seconds behind the back of the first train, Jeff Drake. So right now, the front group starting to fall back into the clutches of the second group.
So maybe some fuel economy happening here a little bit as well, Jack, that could be saving in, coming into that, because with this situation, and we talk about it always, you know, Josh is the one who really gets a lot of the credit, and he's definitely someone that I definitely on broadcast, I'm always talking about how good he is at fuel economy. The thing is, though, is that this is the sort of situation that Josh would recognize that a potential, this is where we need to save fuel, and we need to stretch this run as far as we can go to maybe somehow open up a one-stop window for ourselves. This front trio, they're being a lot calmer on one another than what we've typically seen over the course of this race, saving as much fuel as they can now. We've not seen Liam Quinn harassing Joshua Chin like we've seen from the top two all race long. I think these top three are saving gas.
I would say the same. The fact the lap times are slower, the fact that the guys behind are catching, I would say they are indeed going to be fuel saving. What is going to help them slightly is the fact that the drivers of Adam Blocker and Michele Constantini are going to want to get through this second pack. They are going to slow down this second pack just slightly as we ride on board with Josh Chin. He isn't using sixth gear on the back straight, Randy, so he's obviously fuel saving, but he's not fuel saving using that sixth gear, a strategy which we have seen drivers use in the past.
It's not fully indicative because when you're in clean air, he of course has no draft in front of him. A lot of times fifth gear is designed for clean air, sixth gear behind traffic. Watch the top speed, 226 miles an hour in towards turn one. Let's go with Rick Music. 226, so we'll keep on board with Rick for a little bit. Actually, no, we'll jump back over to Josh. I just want to see what his speed's going to be down the back straightaway and compare once again. So we saw 226 in towards turn one. We're going to see as he goes in towards turn three, 224, 225. Let's go hop back over to Mr. Rick Music. He's going to hit 225 as well, so not a huge top speed differential here, Tyler, which I think you might expect if they're a fuel saving, but somehow, some way, these safety cars are just reeling in the team talent guys by a couple tenths a lap. It is also possible, by the way, remember, they're on the same strategy. Could be that they're saving fuel as well. I'd do a top speed onboard comparison with Mr. Michele Constantini, but of course he's got the slipstream, so he's probably going to be a few mile an hour quicker down the straight regardless, just based on that.
Yeah, certainly, and it's difficult whenever you're in this kind of situation for the guys who didn't pit. They're on the offset strategy from the guys who did, and that at the end of the day could either really help you or could really hurt you. And it's pretty much just the gamble that I think that they had to make, because if not, they were going to be a little bit deeper down in traffic. But now, being that they are out in front and controlling this race, and they've actually picked up the pace enough, Michele Constantini, it's now 4.1 seconds, so he's really getting held up behind Adam Blocker here with all that dirty air.
So doing a little bit of math here, Jack, just, you know, talking about the pit lane cycles and whatnot, in lap for most of these team talent guys would have been basically lap 130. That's when we saw Josh and Liam. Jeff Drake came down pit road one lap later. At 30 laps, they get to 160. They need to find somehow, some way to get to 35. If they can get to 35, actually, no, I take that back. They still can't make it. I'm getting a little confused, sorry, with the way the timing works. I don't think there's any way these team talent guys can make it to the end of the race. Again, in lap for them would have been lap 127, I believe. Let's compare that to Mr. Who do we want to go with? Let's go with Michele Constantini. We know that he's been one of the longest running cars out there. Would have been, I believe, lap number 134. I think Michele can just about stretch this if he can go 33 laps a stint, but he has to go 33 laps a stint.
And we haven't seen Michele as aggressive as we have seen in previous stints, so potentially from the Italian a little bit of fuel saving, just to make sure maybe potentially get to that 33 lap point. At the moment, we're looking at some of these drivers, if not all of these drivers, having to do a splash and dash to get to the end of the race. It's all going to be about when you do that splash and dash, because it is going to be probably one of the shortest spurts of fuel these drivers will have in their iRacing careers. It is going to be a second and a half. They're going to stop, go again. It's going to be that fast to get them to the end of the race. They have to be on the ball. The longer they can go, the better, because you do not want to spend any unnecessary time on the pit lane, especially during a splash and dash, because that is time you're going to lose out on the track, and you are going to have no time to gain that back.
And talking about the way this race is going, Jack, I know it's something we talked about as we're nearly 3/4 distance through this event. This race is absolutely streaming by, considering, like we said, we're currently in session at an elapsed time of 1 hour, 55 minutes, and 52 seconds, but that's including the first 3 laps that were getting the field in order, and that took basically 7 minutes. So we're basically at 50 laps to go inside of 2 hours, which is an enormous sprint to speed here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But I know it's something I talked about with you, Jack, during the Classic IndyCar Series Indy 500. We haven't talked about as much about the adjustments these guys can make on the race car. Of course, in-car adjustments, weight jacker and front and rear anti-roll bars. You can adjust those to both loosen and tighten the car up depending on how it's feeling and really help yourself. But those do potentially have adverse effects on how the tires work. But the big thing I want to talk about with you, Jack, is the adjustments you can make on pit road. Tire pressure adjustments, you can definitely make a tire pressure adjustment for this final stint if you so choose. There's no real lost time there, but the aerodynamic adjustments, really 100 laps to go is my marker for you cannot make any more adjustments because it takes time to change the aerodynamics, especially if you want to do a complete kind of what I call sort of an aero level trim sort of adjustment. So if you want to go out there and if you just want to adjust the front wing a click, maybe 2, as we have a car down on towards pit road, may have been a lap traffic car, not really sure who that was. We'll try to get word for you. But if you want to take a click or 2 into or out of the front wing, I think you can do that. But if you're doing anything that involves messing with the rear wing, maybe trying to trim the car out a little bit, you're not going to be doing that because that's going to be a 2-second or so delay on pit road, maybe even more. So from this point on, the aerodynamic platform you have is basically the aerodynamic platform you're stuck with for these final, now coming up on 49 laps.
Yeah, of course, obviously you were talking about the in-car adjustments. You want to be adjusting them through the stint because the car is going to be changing how it drives as the tires.
Oh, we heard car spun around. Car spun around on pit road. I think that was a Marco Aurelio Brazil who's nosed into the wall on pit road. Replay up on screen. Marco Aurelio Brazil, we saw him be so relevant in the early goings of this race. Actually, no, this started on the exit of turn 4. This wasn't a scheduled pit stop whatsoever for the Brazilian. I thought we saw maybe a lap car down, coming down pit road, trying to top up on fuel. But Marco Aurelio Brazil, who with Wilson Neto dominated the first stint of this race, slams into the outside wall off of turn 4, manages to keep it down to the inside, and Marco Aurelio Brazil's open wheels 500-mile race is done, Tyler.
Yeah, Marco Aurelio Brazil out to the open wheels 500 race, and he, like you said, was somebody who was so good in that first few stints and now is out of this race. Caution flag does not come out because he was able to get it down onto pit road and prevent the caution flag from coming out. But that is big there for Marco Aurelio Brazil, and that's another one of the Brazilian drivers having some really, really big issues in this race.
So we've seen Wilson Neto early on. He was your second place qualifier, had that car trimmed out, got marred into the mid-pack, and is now sitting 20th, 31 seconds off your race lead. Marco Aurelio Brazil, as we said, he definitely didn't have the sort of speed after the first round of pit stops. He was part of the top 2 for about the first stint. Michele Constantini got ahead of him, and after that, Marco really fell like a stone through the field. The only of the 3 Brazilians we have left running is the 407 of Silvio Roberto Sanchez, and he's actually just come down on towards pit road and is now going to be leaving. And actually, this is an interesting time for him to pick Jack. Why do I keep calling you Connery? It doesn't really matter. We'll just avoid it. But this is an interesting pit stop time for him. He only did 25 laps on this stint. I know that the Brazilians have typically done these short runs. We saw both Wilson and we saw Marco doing short runs when they were at the head of the field. But surely they should know that this is the point where you don't want to do short runs. You need to run that extra 5 to 10 laps if you can.
Now he's still gonna have to do 2 more stops to get to the end. He's gonna have to do
one more stop.
Sorry. So he's got to do 1 more stop to get to the end. He will do a full run now, and then it will be about a 10-12 lap run into the checkered flag. So it's going to be about the time that we start seeing people come down onto the pit lane for their splash and dash. However, I think he may have done it 5-6 laps too early for it to work. He should have run the full stint. Jeff Drake as well, 27 laps for him. The number 4's on pit lane, so another driver cementing their place into definitely having to take a splash and dash.
Wasn't Jeff doing something? Didn't we talk about Jeff doing something to the tune of about 30 laps?
Yeah.
So what in the world is Jeff Drake thinking? I don't see how pitting now makes any sense at all.
No, I don't either. I must admit, there's now we're going to watch to see what Liam Quinn's in as well. So's Josh Chin. So the top three, the three-team talent drivers that were P1, 2, 3. In behind him was Bradley Walters. Rick Music's going to stay out and take the lead of the motor race, along with Simon Bryant. I don't understand what's going on here.
This tells me that they likely would have short-filled at the last stop, probably expecting that they were going to go for 2 more stops and couldn't make it. However, I don't see the logic of that whatsoever. I don't see the timing of this strategy making sense. I would have much rather filled the car up and be able to go for another 6 or 7 laps. That gets you to what, 37 to go?
Yeah.
And then if there's a caution, maybe you can stretch it. If you can Alexander Rossi it. All they've done by doing this, if it's completely taken out of their toolbox, Jack, the ability to maybe make it to the end on 1 more stop should they catch a lucky yellow. Because they surely should have been going for another 6 or 7 laps.
And now Adam Blocker's in. Adam Blocker's done 24 laps on that stint. They've still got 43 laps to run in this motor race, and he's going to come down onto the pit lane. Be interesting to see who is next to cough. This is an interesting strategy from these drivers, but you are exactly right, Randy. They've taken out of the toolbox that ability to go to the end on 1 more stop, and all of a sudden, we're seeing drivers commit to the splash and dash. That is a very risky strategy to do, because we know that with a caution, even with 1 caution, they can't run that long. 2 is going to be a push to get to the end on this tank of fuel comfortably. I think we need to see 3 cautions between now and the checkered flag. And the way that this race is going, that's not going to happen.
And actually something, we haven't talked about this whatsoever, Jack. Tyler, we'll get to eventually, don't worry, I'm sorry. But the track temperature has changed. Remember earlier at the start of the race, I talked about how the track temp was about 108 degrees Fahrenheit, Jack. That has skyrocketed. Current track temperature on the racetrack, 121 degrees Fahrenheit. The ambient temperature hasn't changed whatsoever, so that is going to be affecting things, Jack. They may be coming down and making these strategy calls based purely on the tire strategy. They may be trying to essentially make the undercut work, but I don't see the undercut working over the course of a run here at the Speedway.
And now what we're seeing is, for those who use sort of the Celsius way of measuring temperature, we're seeing 50-degree track temperatures. And all of a sudden, we're seeing a situation where, as you say, Randy, the tyres are going to be more important than fuel. Christopher Demerit's in. He's done 31 laps. He's the first driver we've seen go a long, normal fuel stint that we expect to see from these cars today. Rick Music's still out. He's going to complete 30 laps at the end of this one. He's going to stay... He's going to come down onto the pit lane, actually. So Rick Music's just pitted. Simon Bryant is going to take over the race lead with Michele Constantini in tow.
Something's happened to Chris Stouffer. Something's happened to Chris Stouffer. He's on pit...
Oh, not again.
Well, he's 19 laps down, so it happened laps ago. We missed it. He's been on pit road smoking. I'm going to go to his last lap that he's run. It was lap 143 for him. We're going to stay on this replay for a while here for Chris Stouffer, because this was someone who looked like he had the potential to maybe come away with this race. I don't remember seeing what happened to him, but let's see here. The 13 car, you see Andrew Wood. That was a car that tangled with, I believe it was Wilson Neto a little bit early on off of turn 4 in towards turn 3. No contact there, so not seeing what happened to Chris just yet. I wonder if maybe he just was having issues with cooling and the motor just let go. I know that he runs this lap of lap 143. He comes onto pit road, and actually he may have just called it. So I think likely happened is I don't think he's ever come back onto the racetrack, and I think the motor just let go on pit lane.
He's been sat on pit lane for 14.5 minutes, according to my timing screen. Tyler's just pointed out to us as well, there was contact with the outside wall at turn number 4, so potentially, again, damage may be left over from the original contact from Chris Stouffer has caused him more issues. He hasn't had a good race since that contact, and as you say, Randy, just decided to call it a day, come down onto the pit lane, and try again another one.
So these Sadie cars are getting phenomenal fuel mileage right now, and they're doing the strategy that I think everyone was expecting from the group of cars that stayed out here. So let's see, down the back straightaway is going to go Simon Bryant. Michele Constantini is cycling into P2. You see that car in the middle. Believe that's no, that's Brendan Lichtenberg. I take that back. That car is a 1 lap down. So right after Michele Constantini, you get to Henry Bennett, and then 4th place on the racetrack is Joe Branch. But Simon Bryant, Michele Constantini, and Henry Bennett, the cars that have yet to be down on towards pit road. 37 laps to go, and Simon Bryant is getting great fuel economy out of this race car, Tyler.
Yeah, Simon Bryant is really getting some nice fuel economy, and he's got about a second lead here over Michele Constantini. He's on 31 laps there for Simon Bryant, 29 for Michele Constantini, and this is going, I think that both of these drivers, yes, they can both make it on one more stop. I believe it'll be close.
They're still long. It's going to depend when they come down pit road. Because we've not seen anyone go 36 really, and Simon Bryant's not going to get close, so he's going to come down with 36 after 32 laps of running, and that would have been the longest, Tyler, they could go, because if you can go the extra 3 or 4 laps at this point, there's no real reason not to. So Simon, I don't think, can make it. Next one that'll be close will be Michele and then Henry.
Yeah, so exactly as you said there, Michele Constantini going to be very close on fuel here if he can make it to the end, or if he is going to need a splash and dash. I think he's going to need a splash and dash to make it to the end. There's a possibility that he can do it, but he better have some incredible fuel economy in that ART car if he's looking to go 36 laps in the final stint.
Right now, Michele is running lap number 30 of his stint, and he's going to just tick over into lap 31 with 35 laps to go. This might just come down to here, Jack, a 1 or 2 lap differential for Michele Constantini. And one of these stints, either this stint or the next one, might have to be an Alexander Rossi sort of run to try to eke out an extra 2.5 miles in fuel. Working lap number, he came down, it was 137 I'm showing in the session, and he's currently on lap 169, so he's currently on lap 32.
Yeah, so 32 laps completed at the Yard of Bricks for Michele Constantini on this stint. He's showing no signs of boxing, so he's going for 33. This is going to be one of the longest green flag runs we've seen by a driver whose name isn't Joe Branch.
He can do it because 34 laps to go right now. He's done 33 laps. But next time he crosses start finish, it will be 33 laps to go. So Michele Constantini definitely in the catbird seat right now, Tyler, as the only driver that can make it to the end of the race on one more stop of fuel.
Yeah, Michele Constantini, he is in the driver's seat here for the OpenWheels.com Indy 500. He can do this now on one more stop. Will he dive down into pit lane this time? He will. Michele Constantini in. He's going to push the limits into the pit lane, and that may have been a speeding penalty.
This is going to be close. This is going to be really close. Joe Branch on pit road and off as well in the background. Well, in the foreground, excuse me. You see that. Couple cars screaming down start finish side by side. But Michele Constantini, did he manage to avoid the penalty? Roughly 10 seconds what we're expecting on the pit stop time. Probably a little closer to 9, 4, 5, 6. Michele Constantini waiting to get the release to go. Car drops off the jacks, 10 seconds of fuel. That's the longest we've seen a car sit in the pit box all day, Jack. He got every drop of fuel he could.
He indeed did, and how he got away with the speeding penalty that time, I do not know. On the last time round, I said he locked up his front wheels onto the pit lane and almost got a pit lane speed limit penalty. This time around, he came through 10 mile an hour faster than the last time and still managed to get away without a penalty. So out and away is Michele Constantini. He's rejoined the track in 9th position. However, he has 32 laps to run at the Yard of Bricks, and 32 laps is shorter. It's going to be a 33 lap stint from him, Randy. It's going to be the same as the last time. He's going to have to Alexander Rossi this, because on the last stint he had a draft for some of it. This time around he doesn't. Michele Constantini now, he's fuel saving mode to get to the end of this race.
He definitely is. He cycles out onto the racetrack. There's some cars a little bit in the rear view. You have Henry Bennett as well as Brendan Lichtenberg. If Michele's smart, he will let them catch up to him, and he will just sit behind them and park it because no one else is really even close. Leading duo right now, a leading trio even, is Josh Chin, Liam Quinn, Jeff Drake. This is a trio, Tyler, that we've seen be so strong here, but they need a caution to get back into contention. That's the only problem with Michele Costantini's situation right now, is that if a yellow flag comes out, he's going to be sitting, currently he sits in the 9th position. That said, he will not have to come down pit road if a caution comes out. Everyone else will definitely be coming down and taking fuel.
Yeah, exactly. He will not have to come down pit road, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does anyway, because
tires.
At this point in the race, you've got to pretty much limit all sort of question marks out of your strategy. You've just got to know that you can make it to the end and don't even try and risk it if you don't have to. But if he's confident that he can save enough fuel behind the safety car, if indeed a caution flag does come out, then that really is not a bad idea for him just to stick out and then lead this race on to the end. But he will have drivers with fresher tires behind. So it's a very tough strategy call for that ART team to try and make if indeed the caution flag comes out. But with how clean we've seen this race, it doesn't look as if a caution flag is going to be coming out anytime soon.
And you've mentioned Simon Bryant here, Jack, in our chat, and Simon's actually really interesting because he might be one of the few other drivers that if a caution comes out, he doesn't come down pit road. His in-lap was lap 167. You compare that to Michele Costantini, whose in-lap was lap number 170 in the session. So a 3-lap differential for Simon Bryant, but I still think if you're Simon, I think you're still better off at least coming down pit road and especially just getting fuel in that car to be safe even if a caution comes out. But that said, like you said, he could definitely make the call to stretch it and is the only other driver besides Michele that's even close to the window.
There is one other driver who is close to the window if we do get a caution. That's Henry Bennett, the driver currently sat behind Michele. So Michele has tucked himself in behind Brendan Lichtenberg, and Lichtenberg, by the looks of things, is not going to be safe. Even if a caution comes out, he is going to have to come down onto the pit lane. However, Henry Bennett is going to be close. He did go 2 laps shorter than Michele Costantini, so he's just completed his 7th lap of his stint. Michele's just completed his 5th. So Henry, another driver who is close to the bubble, but we need a caution for that to happen. Michele now, he's picked up the speed a little bit, but he's got a draft, so he is able to fuel save. This is the situation he needs. We're going to be looking at about 28 seconds on the pit lane for the people who need to do splash and dash. Current gap between Costantini and Josh Chin in the lead is 11.5.
Yeah, so this is, it's 17 seconds that they need to somehow, some way stretch out, and the time right now just isn't there. Michele, even though he might be saving fuel and doing it in the slipstream, he's not losing much time. Josh Chin, your race leader, last trip around the racetrack, 40.796. We go over to Michele Costantini. He was quicker at a 40.723. So Michele's doing splendid work in the slipstream right now, sipping fuel like an absolute madman. So in-lap as well, Tyler, because we're coming up on pit stop times actually for those cars that we saw come down pit road. Josh Chin's in-lap would have been lap 159 for us in the session, currently working lap 176. So he's nearly 20 laps into this run. He's at the midway point of this run, starting to get into the later third of it. So these guys, these Team Talent guys, if they want to take the advantage with new tires, I think they should pit kind of early. But then again, if you pit early, you run the risk of maybe getting trapped a lap down under a yellow.
Yeah, there's always that risk. Silvio Sanchez as well into the pit lane this time, and he is off the jacks and away. But I wouldn't be surprised if those Team Talent guys come in pretty soon from now, and then that will be their final stop of the race. Once that happens here in just a few laps time, we'll see if they all come down together, if they try their split strategies like they did before, but I really don't think there's going to be much use to it, because if Michele Costantini can keep that car running to the end and has the fuel economy to make it to the end, I think he's pretty much got this race locked up.
Have a car peeling off the racetrack. It's going to be their final pit stop, Silvio Roberto Sanchez. Talked about him. He's the final Brazilian really in the race at the moment. Wilson Neto technically, I believe, might be out there circulating, but he's about 7-8 seconds back off of Silvio Sanchez. So Silvio's going to be the last one in contention. John Downing also on pit road, getting what should be his final service. Off of turn 4 come your race leaders. They won't even think about pit road. And I have to think here, Jack, if they filled the car up at the last stop, they need to run this as late as they can. I don't think they need to even think about tires. I don't think they have it in them to open up the 11-second margin to maybe equalize with Michele, even if they get out there on new tires and try to do it. They need to just hope and pray for a caution at this point because they got the strategy way wrong.
Yeah, their strategy, they've got them up at the front of the field now, but it's all about who's going to be crossing the yard of bricks after 200 laps, not after 176, 177 laps that these guys are currently running in this race as they head themselves out of turn at number 4 once again. You can see behind Jeff Drake just navigating himself around a little bit of lap traffic there in the form of the 4:07. Kenny Constantini still sitting down in that 9th position behind Brendan Lichtenberg, but as it stands, they are catching the driver of Bradley Walters just a little bit on that lap. And this probably is one of the first laps of this stint where Michele's actually lost a little bit of time to your leaders. It was only a 10th, but it's going to be a 10th that he can't afford to lose much from. He is saving fuel, however. This is going to still be very close for Michele getting to the end of this one on this stint with 33 laps. However, it is possible, and it is something that he is going to try and do.
Pit road goes Liam Quinn as well as Jeff Drake. So Josh Chin is going to be the last one staying out there. So how many laps is that going to be? 22 is what I think is what my count is showing here, Jack. So
22 for Liam, 23 for Jeff. So Jeff's gone one longer. Josh is going on to his 23rd lap of his stint. Whether we see him down or not, we'll have to wait and see.
This just makes no sense to me.
They're going new tires.
No, right, I understand that, but the whole thing just doesn't make any sense to me. Because that's now at least 9 laps on the last 2 stints, Jack, that they've not taken, which is 18 laps of fuel. And if they had just taken those 18 laps, they would have been 4 laps short.
It'd be interesting to see what... Oh, no, Josh is in as well.
Yeah.
So Josh has now come down onto the pit lane. Simon Bryant takes over the race lead in the 22. Now, we've seen these guys go long. So Simon Bryant, I expect to see stay out for quite a number of laps. Following in Josh Chin is going to be Bradley Walters. So these guys are going for the new tyre strategy. To get the most out of the new tyres, they're going for a 20-21 lap run. However, I don't see the benefit of doing that. You might as well leave this current set of tyres on for the extra 4 laps they've got to do. Unless the track temperature really is having a massive effect. It has gone up again by the looks of things. We're now sitting at 52 degrees Celsius, 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So the track is getting hotter as we go into the afternoon.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that as we take a look. 125 degrees. And it's not that there's not a pace advantage, Tyler, with the new tires. It's just that there's not enough of a pace advantage of them to reel this gap back down and in, because we're gonna do it visually. Michele Constantini is crossing the yard of bricks. We're gonna find one of these cars that's just coming off of pit road. We'll go with Josh Chin. He's going down the back straightaway, and actually, Josh has made a mistake on pit road, I believe, because he's come out well behind Jeff Drake. Jeff Drake's just now coming off of turn 4. I don't see them reeling in half a lap over Michele Constantini here. I have a feeling, Tyler, I think the Team Talent guys thought that the fuel economy was a lot closer for those guys than it really was. I think they were thinking that those guys were going to be 1 to 2 laps short. If that was the case, I would actually really like the strategy that these guys are running with, kind of splitting the difference of the race distance. But with this, what they've essentially done is calculated their opponent's fuel wrong.
Yeah, they've completely they've made a slight technical error there in calculating their opponent's fuel, and that's, at the end of the day, it's cost them a lot, because they've now gone from, well, they could have gotten themselves really into contention for a race win at the caution flag, which was nearly, I would say, about 90-ish laps ago. They could have put themselves into contention to win this race, but as of right now, with that little bit of error in calculations, that has pretty much cost them what could be the race. I think it's going to be nearly impossible for them to catch up about half a lap.
And the thing that's crazy to me, Jack, and we've made so many comparisons to it, and we have to make another one. This is 2 Indianapolis 500 races that Team Talent has completely muffed the strategy. We saw it happen in the Classic IndyCar Series Indy 500 when they came down pit road, tried to do this weird fuel window thing, and they handed Team Vortex a 1-2-3 when Vortex was not even close to being the fastest team in that 500-mile race. We're seeing the same thing here today now. I think they've completely overthought their strategy. If they would have just stayed out on the racetrack, done an extra 8 to 9 laps, they've essentially thrown away all the track position I think they could have had, because now they're even in a situation where if a caution comes out, they've just thrown away all their track position as well. I don't see any way that this strategy makes any sense if you're under the assumption that at least one of your competitors can make it on gas.
There was something I was taught growing up, and that is that a mistake is only a mistake if you don't learn from it. Team Talent tried this strategy at Indianapolis here 2 weeks ago.
Simon Bryant in, by the way. Simon Bryant from the leaders down onto the pit lane, ladies and gentlemen. So Rick Music is going to take over the race lead. Constantini and Henry Bennett going to make themselves up into 2nd and 3rd position. But back to what I was saying. They tried something at the CIS Indy 500. It didn't quite work out. Fine. They needed to try something different here today, and they haven't done that. They've made the same mistake. And Team Talent really need to go away from here today and think, what could we have done differently? Much like they did with the CIS Indy 500, but this time really scrutinise it, because there is something flawed with their strategy that they've used here today. It's the same flaw they had 2 weeks ago, and it's just cost them another chance at an Indy 500 win. So right now, Rick Music will become the final driver that still owes us a pit stop, yet to come down pit road. 16 laps to go left in the race. He came down pit road 25 laps ago, so he can stay out for about 10 more laps here, Jack, which is, again, this is what I would have liked them to do. I'm not saying that they could have made it to the end of the race, and I don't expect that they could have made it to the end of the race. The point I'm trying to get across is even if they were short, they've just they're put themselves in a situation that if there's a late caution, they'd thrown away all their track position, and they've thrown away 18 laps of fuel by cutting their stints down 8 laps on each run, 9 laps, on each run from what we know that they were doing. So 14 laps to go for Rick Music as he comes across the start-finish line, but it'd have to be a 40-lap run for him to be able to make it. So he's about 5 laps short, and I like what Rick Music is doing, because now if there's a late race caution, the reason doing this makes sense is because they're at the head of the field, and the tire drop-off is so severe that if a yellow comes out, everyone's coming down pit road for tires, and Rick Music would likely be the leading car at the restart, Jack.
Yeah, so Rick Music's got about an 8-lap window, so where if there is a caution, he is in the prime position. Himself back off of pit lane ahead. Rob Powers down onto the pit lane. On the Team Talent situation, Liam Quinn and Jeff Drake are currently sitting P4 and 5. They are 15 seconds back from Michele Constantini and Henry Bennett as it stands. They are catching, however, just very slightly because of the difference in the tyre grip. Henry Bennett has got to splash and dash. He is not going to make it to the end because he has to do a 35-lap stint. We haven't seen anyone do a 35-lap stint so far under green flag conditions. With these track temperatures, it could be possible because you are going to be running a little bit slower. You are going to be using a little bit less fuel. However, and also he has been sat behind Michele Constantini for almost all of this stint. Those guys are now in quite a big pack by the looks of things as well. So Henry Bennett playing the long game with Michele Constantini. If Henry Bennett has got to pit, there could be a Team Talent P2 coming on here, Randy. However, P1, I think they have miscalculated because I think they're ignoring the fact that Michele Constantini has been able to do a 33-lap stint in green flag conditions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right here as these guys work down the front straightaway once again. And if Michele somehow gets his fuel economy wrong and can't make it, it would put those guys in a very good situation. So off of turn 1 and through turn 2, go these two. Rick Music still staying out there on the racetrack. Again, don't expect him to come down for another 6 or 7 laps, but there's almost no way surely that he can make it. His lap times are too fast. Before anyone says, oh, Alexander Rossi did a huge stint. Remember, Alexander Rossi was at points coasting down the racetrack. We've not seen Rick Music come anywhere close to that. So Rick is running the car pretty much as quickly as he can, maybe saving a little bit, but not much. But it's really all on these two, and especially that car that's third in line of what we have on screen, but second in position here, Tyler, of Henry Bennett. Can he stretch it to the end as we near 25 miles to go?
Yeah, and Rick Music is into the box. So Music into the box, and that will hand over the race lead to Michele Constantini. So Constantini to the lead, and I believe he is the only one who is good on fuel at the moment, other than the drivers who, or at least the drivers who pitted a few laps ago that's good on fuel. I believe Henry Bennett will have to come in once again, but if Bennett can somehow save enough fuel, that's going to be incredible.
Yep, that's exactly the situation here. So down front straightaway, 10 laps to go is what it'll be for drivers as they cross the yard of bricks. Did Rick pit and I missed it? Yes, he did. Yes, in lap 51. So Rick Music in on pit road. I was checking on something, seeing if there's a possible tech issue on our side. But Rick Music has come down on towards pit road. He rolls 10 laps short to the end of the race, and he's back out there on the racetrack, which means it's between these two cars you see on screen of Michele Costantini and Henry Bennett. They are second and third in the line that you can see. And actually, I suspect, as I work, Michele, not only do they have a car to draft with here, Jack, but it's just the Alexander Rossi Indy 500 win, because AJ Burton is a teammate to Michele Costantini. So AJ isn't just going to do nothing but sit in front of Michele for the duration of this race and give him the slipstream he needs to get fuel.
Now, the lap times between Michele Costantini and the guys trying to catch him, Liam Quinn, Jeff Drake, Simon Bryan, Adam Blocker, they're 10 seconds now back is Liam Quinn. This is going to be close. The lap times last time around, Michele Costantini did a 41.7. In that pack, they were doing high 40s, so they are catching.
Henry Bennett with lap traffic. Henry's trying to save fuel. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jack, but 2 lap cars have come through and have separated Henry Bennett from Michele Costantini. Henry has no top speed whatsoever and is trying to save gas, and he's lost his slipstream because of it.
And also, not only has he lost the slipstream because of it, AJ Burton's also come down onto the pit lane, so Burton's had to cough for fuel. Michele's got to find a new gap in the traffic. He's got himself tucked behind the driver of Christopher Demerit, so a very fast driver. He is a lap down on your race leader. He won't be when they come back across the yard of bricks this time, but another one of the Indy 500 group drivers. So Demerit now, he's going to be helping Michele Costantini to get himself to the end of this race. 8 seconds now between Michele and Liam Quinn. 7 laps to the checkered flag. Henry Bennett, 28 laps into this stint. He's not going to do 35 laps on green, I don't feel. However, last time around, the 42.6, he's also doing an Alexander Rossi because he wants to finish this race in second position. However, I'm not sure whether the gap's big enough back to Liam Quinn for him.
He can definitely fuel save to the end of the race. That is he's definitely trying. Let me change what I just said. Henry Bennett is definitely trying to fuel save to the end of the race, but I don't think he's going to have the speed to make it. The 66 of Michele Costantini looks like he's in the catbird seat because he's not only saving fuel, but he's been maintaining decent speed. A 42.0 last trip around the racetrack, and actually, Jack, excuse me, I'll go to you, Tyler. They've lost more speed than I think we expected, considering they've already done a 33-lap stint. Michele and Henry were both down in the 42-second bracket the last couple of laps. If we have 6 laps to go, the Team Talent guys are out there doing 40.8s. This may not be over yet. Michele may not have the speed.
Yeah, Michele Costantini last lap, a 41.3, but that was still a whole lot slower than the Team Talent guys. So this may not be over for them. If they can get themselves back.
So these guys work through as they come down the front straightaway. 5 laps to go as they work down in towards turn number 1, Jack. Michele Costantini, lap time at the stripe, 41.234. Liam Quinn is going to come through at a 40.881. So Michele had 1 slow lap, but he quickly was able to rebound and get it back. Henry Bennett, though, he's still running 42s, 43s, and Liam Quinn is shortly going to make short work of him.
Henry Bennett, he's got to pit at this point. He's losing too much time. I don't think he's going to be able to hold on to that second position, almost certainly with 4 laps to go at the stripe. But Michele Costantini, still 7 seconds between him and Liam Quinn. With every lap that goes past, it's 1 less lap that he's got to do to hold off these guys. The lap times are getting closer. The difference between the lap times are getting closer as we head towards the end of this race. I think Michele knows he's better on fuel. Christopher Demerit is just dragging him round, and sat behind him is the driver of David Adams. He's just sitting there watching this. I think that Michele Costantini...
Oh, we got a car in the wall! We got a car in the wall! The number 4 of Jeff Drake finds the outside retaining wall off of turn 1. And that might be the caution that ends this motor race. Jeff Drake with a disastrous mistake at the end of this thing, fighting with lap traffic. Fighting with Adam Blocker, the number 74. Jeff pushes up the racetrack, exiting turn 1, running a little bit of a Sato line, and that caution, I believe, Jack, will end the motor race as the safety car will get deployed with 3 laps to go.
3 laps to go at Indianapolis. I've managed to predict something correctly this year, Randy. Something I haven't been good at so far.
What?
I said before this race started, Michele Constantini will win this race because he is someone who is always quick at Indianapolis, always going to be someone who's strong, and he's just proven that one brilliantly. This will definitely finish under caution because I believe we do 4 caution laps here. I'm going to go double check that. We do indeed, by the looks of it. It might only be, yeah, we will finish under caution for this race.
Well, we're going to wait for confirmation. This is right on the cusp based on when that safety car was deployed. This is right on the cusp of being in the window that they might get a single lap. We're going to have to wait and see. The lights on the safety car would have to go out this time. So confirmation will come in roughly a quarter mile, maybe closer to half a mile's distance as they run through turn number 4. Michele Constantini, all the drivers very likely already know whether the race is restarting or not based on the in-sim commands, but we have to wait for the little blinky lights on top of that iRacing safety car as they run down the front straightaway. And a race that was dominated with green flag running. We ran the first 100 laps with a single caution. We ran the next 96 without a caution, and the final 4 will get a yellow flag. And Michele Constantini, as long as something disastrous doesn't happen, Jack, is going to be the winner of the Open Wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions.
I have known Michele now for just over 2 years, and every single time he has attempted to win the Indianapolis 500, he's failed. There was a time where he had never finished an Indianapolis 500 on a RaceBot TV broadcast, but now the Italian has overcome that in his first year with Apex Racing Team, a driver who's been concentrating on that VRS GTR Racing World Championship a lot this year, really been trying that one as we see a replay with Jeff Drake's incident on your screen causing this final caution. But Michele Constantini, what a drive from him today, Randy. What a brilliant drive. I'm so happy for him because I know he's wanted this one for a long, long time.
We're watching the incident with Jeff Drake again. I want to get another shot from this angle right here on board with Adam Blocker. And it's such a weird incident to me, Jack, as we watch it back here. It's such a weird incident, Tyler, as they work through because he really didn't have any dirty air or anything like that. He had completely clean track in front of him. He just screwed up turn 1.
Yeah, I mean, he just pretty much ran wide turn number 1, and that was just, yeah, that's all that ended up happening. He just screwed up through turn number 1, and that cost him his race and doing a long time of it. So, yeah, that's a really unfortunate error to make such late in this race.
Yep, especially here at the end of the motor race, and it's unfortunately going to be the caution that will end it. They're going to see the white flag this time. The lights may even go out on the safety car just to troll all of us, but the race is definitely not going to be restarting here as they work down start-finish. White flag this time here, Jack, and right now, I mean, what a running order. Liam Quinn's able to get his way up into second. Henry Bennett's probably not too happy here. He was only half a lap away from ending up P2, but because of the timing of that caution, he cycles back to third.
Bearing in mind that he was essentially a lap or 2 short on fuel with that green flag run, I think he'll still be happy with that 3rd position. It's still a podium at Indianapolis, which in itself is a pretty good achievement. So for Henry Bennett, congratulations. Simon Bryant, he's going to be kicking himself because another half a lap or even corner, he could have got Henry Bennett because just how much time the Brit was losing. And I think that Liam Quinn definitely wouldn't have caught Michele. There was still too much of a gap between the two for under green flag conditions for that gap to have come down and really made a difference.
The Open Wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions was one of the most in-depth special events that's ever happened on the iRacing service. 1 week ago, we watched qualifications both on bump day and on pole day. We saw the legend of Young O take pole position on the Saturday, being the only driver to lock his way into the field. And then we got to see the drama of bump day qualifications. Coming into the race, it was Andrew Wood, who was the 34th qualified car at the end of bump day. Due to a driver having to drop out, he took the 33 spots. The drama and the emotions of all of that was around the possibility of being able to compete, but most importantly, winning at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And the driver who, after 500 miles of racing, after 500 miles, a race that was dominated by green flag running, will end under yellow, and the number 66 of Michele Constantini at pit road at pace speed will come down start finish. An Apex Racing team with Indy 500 group as well as Michele Constantini will win the Open Wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions. Tyler.
Michele Constantini wins the inaugural Open Wheels 500, and he did it on a race of fuel there at the end. He makes it to the end. ART are winners here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and you can just see there, Michele Constantini, the number 66, will take it home for them.
See drivers cycling through, giving their congratulations. See teammates that he's worked with over the course of this week as well, stopping by, congratulating him. You see Henry Bennett and Josh Chin giving him the brake check as well out in front. But Michele Constantini, although they still sit behind the safety car, there is a lot of respect shown by this entire group. You see Apex in the mix there, Power Slide, Team Talent / Team Chimera in the mix as well. Everybody is more than a little bit happy to see this man, Michele Constantini, a man whose name no one can pronounce, a problem I know very well, win the Open Wheels 500-mile race as they work down turn 3 and towards turn 4. Now the big question has to be, Jack, does he have fuel to do some burnouts?
I really hope so, because I'd love to see Michele really give it a good shot at some burnouts. I think Zach Campbell will go and join him as well on that main straight as we see everyone else come down on to the pit lane to finish off this 500-mile race. And what a 500-mile race it was. The attrition rate wasn't too high. 33 cars started. Looks as though 24 finished the race. The last driver classified is going to be that driver of Yang Wei.
Only 9 cars dropped out of this event. As you see, a number of cars work their way down towards the start finish. I think those are all of the Apex Racing and Indy 500 group cars that you see out there on the racetrack still. All of them celebrating the victory that they had here today. So as they work through, I don't think we're going to see any donuts here. Oh, yep, yes we are. And, well, that front wing is destroyed. That's about 100 grand down the drain. Tyler.
I don't even think at this point Michele Constantini cares. I think that all he's worried about right now is just burning them down on the front straightaway here. And that Apex Racing team with Indy 500 group will get to kiss the bricks at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That was quite the race that these drivers had to go through today. But it was one driver of Michele Constantini who was able to take the victory there in the end. That was a very long race for these drivers. There was not many caution flags that came out, so it was really all about how good your race setup was and how good your strategy was, and it seems to me that the Apex Racing team with Indy 500 group got that spot on.
So there it was, 2 hours and 32 minutes is what I see as the official in-session time for Michele Constantini. When you account for roughly the 6 minutes that the pacing took, that's 2 hours and 26 minutes for the Open Wheels 500-mile race to take part. And now that racing is done and dusted, we are going to go down your finishing results here from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Open Wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions. Michele Constantini started this race on the inside of the second row. He got out front after the first round of pit stops, getting out ahead of Marco Aurelio Brazil, and he did not leave those top couple positions all race long. Liam Quinn and Team Talent, they will come home in the second spot, but that's a group that needs to leave the Indianapolis Motor Speedway thinking about their approach to strategy, because they definitely overthunk this one and I think threw away a better chance at a win than what they gave themselves. Henry Bennett comes home in the third spot with Simon Bryant representing the fourth position. All different teams inside of your top four. Adam Blocker will round out the top five with Joshua Chin in P6. Bradley Walters in the seventh spot. Rick Music 8th. Jeff Drake, the car you see involved in that incident that brought out the caution, he was able to limp around under the yellow to take home a 9th place finish. And Joe Branch will be a driver that was marred in the mid-pack for the bulk of that race. He'll be able to get himself up to a top 10 due to the fuel economy he was getting over the 500 miles that lap. 500 miles of that race. Silvio Roberto Sanchez in the 11th spot. Riley Thompson in 12th. Brendan Lichtenberg in 13th. Andrew Wood was the alternate who got his way into this event because of a dropout. He ends up in the 14th spot. Wilson Neto 15th. John Downing in 16th, and Christopher DeMarant in 17th. He will be the last driver scored on the lead lap. David Adams in the 18th spot. 19th is Zach Campbell with the 20th place car going to Rob Powers. 21st is Matt Pavelski, AJ Burton in 22nd, Tim Doyle in 23rd, and what a race this man had. He took pole position. What a week this man's had. Took pole position last week and just didn't have the speed in dirty air. He finishes 3 laps down in 24th. Andres Eek is 25th. Marco Aurelio Brazil in 26th. Chris Christopher in 27th. With Austin Espetin, Dakota DeCenzo, and Hugo Holston rounding out your top 30. The results will show 38, but only 33 cars actually took to the racetrack. Logan Simmons in 31st. John Hasek Doggett in 32nd, and Dylan Freckleton. It shows Richard Hearn in 33rd. Richie was a safety car driver. Dylan Freckleton, who's currently scored in 34th, he will be logged as the final finisher after an early incident in today's event. They're starting to cycle through into the RaceSpot TV TeamSpeak server, and let's talk to him, the man who after 500 miles and 200 laps, Michele Costantini, you have won the Open Wheels 500-mile race. How are you feeling?
I am just ecstatic, Randy. I have no words.
It was a dramatic race, and of course that final caution came at a very awkward time. What was your mindset with the way the fuel was looking? You were one of 2 drivers that seemed like you can make it on the fuel economy. A number of other drivers, there was definitely a split amongst the field of coming off that sort of final yellow, the penultimate yellow really, with the fuel economy and the strategy that people had going into that final sprint out there on the racetrack. Did you think you could make it on one stop from there, or was that something you kind of picked up on into that run?
Yeah, I think I would have made it. I would have needed draft for the whole way, but I had Chris in front of me the whole time. Then I had AJ in front as well, who had damage, so I could just ride behind him, running high lap times and saving fuel. So with both of them, I was gonna make it either way. And yeah, I just can't thank i5G enough for this. I would not be here without them.
i5G, of course, being the Indy 500 group, and I want to flash back, if your memory can think this far back, 170 laps, the first round of pit stops. You kind of settled into third near the end of that first stint. Pit stop sequence cycles through, and of course through that first run, when we first went to green flag racing, it was the Brazilians of Wilson Neto as well as Marco Aurelio Brazil that were kind of leading the train, doing the leapfrog at the head of the field. You managed to jump Marco through the pit stop sequence, and he struggled in the dirty air. We saw the Brazilians in May earlier this year. They struggled in the dirty air. Was that something you were expecting? Because we also saw Young O really quickly lose the lead and cycle down to basically 20th, and that's basically where he stayed. Did you expect that if you'd got past the likes of Wilson and Marco, they'd struggle with the dirty air, or were you surprised to see how much they both dropped back when you got around them?
Yeah, I definitely knew that they were not as good as us in the draft, so I wasn't necessarily surprised about them dropping back when I passed them. I was more surprised about Young dropping out so quickly, because I never raced with him, but people told me that is extremely good, not only in qualifying but also in race setup. So it was definitely a surprise to see him drop off that quickly. But yeah, other than that, we had a very solid car, and I knew green flag pit stops were one of my strongest points. So yeah, I had a good lead because of that later on in the race in front of Marco and Wilson and Powerslide then. So yeah, I'm really happy about the race.
And now going into that final sequence, we saw you in the final 10 laps. You as well as Henry Bennett, you were the two drivers that seemed like you were really trying to stretch the fuel. You, of course, able to do it. Henry was having to save a little bit harder for a little bit longer than you were, but you had a couple laps in there that were sort of 1 to 2 seconds off the pace, and there was some excitement because it looked like that somehow maybe you had made a mistake, or somehow a window had opened for the team talent guys to maybe reel you in. What happened on those couple laps? Was it just the struggle of trying to get hooked up with Demerit, or what led to those couple laps that we saw that were 2 seconds or so off the what we were typically seeing from those i5G cars over the course of the race?
That is probably when I had to switch the car in front of me's draft. So when AJ pitted and I had to lift in clean air for Christopher, that's probably what you're talking about. So yeah, that's why I lost a lot of time in those 2 laps, but still I was able during those 2 laps to save even more fuel. So those particular laps actually helped quite a fair bit the overall fuel save for the stint.
Well, Michele, I know that this is the last couple weeks is where I think a lot of the iRacing community has really seen this with the qualifying, of course, and then, of course, the race today. But I know that this has been a project for you guys for the last couple months, working up into this and getting into this event and being competitive, the entire i5G group. Tell me about your month and tell me how it feels. What are your thoughts winning this race after a couple months now of work and tuning and setting up and endless hours of testing, I'm sure?
This is probably the event that has had the best organization on anything I've raced with. Tanner and OpenWheels.com had made an incredible job throughout the whole month and prior to that in preparation to this. So huge thank you to them for putting this up, and hopefully next year we'll have the same. And yeah, thanks to them.
So Michele, closing thoughts for you. You've mentioned them several times, but I know there's likely sponsors on that race car. Who do you have to thank? Who gets it done, not only with the Indy 500 group, but for Apex Racing Team? Who helps support you in that group? Who do you have to thank for this win tonight?
So yeah, as I said, i5G, Apex Racing Team, Broken Arrow, AJ Barton, and Christian Still for the huge help during the month. And thank you guys for the broadcast. And once again, I can't remark it enough how much I'm thanking also Tanner and OpenWheels.com for this event, which has been incredible.
So there he was, Mr. Michele Costantini, your winner of the Open Wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions. He may not sound it too much, but trust me, he is more than happy and more than pleased with the performance he put in today. Coming home in second, representing Team Talent, and maybe the person that if Michele had to save, we were probably thinking may have had the best chance to win with the showing, with the pace he was showing in those closing laps, is Liam Quinn. And Jack Stiles, you're stood by with Liam.
Liam, first of all, congratulations. Second place at Indianapolis. An amazing feat for you. Just take us through yours and your team's strategy in that final few laps. We weren't expecting to see you down on the pit lane with sort of 20, 25 laps to go to get that tank of fuel and 4 new tyres. Was that trying to hunt down Michele and get that race win and do something slightly different?
Yeah, we had no choice. So we had to differ the strategy on an earlier caution in order to get to the front, and we had me, Jeff, and Josh up there. We saw Riley made the fuel save work and Michele pit on the same lap, so we were fairly sure he could make it. When he started losing, a second and a half a lap for the start bit, all we could do is send it and just push as hard as we can. But as soon as he started getting about 7 seconds ahead, he started doing full speed laps, and I think even without the caution, he was good to go. So I think we did the best we could, honestly. P2 at the start of the race would have been excellent for me, so I'll happily take it.
Oh, well, obviously, the start of the race as well, we did sort of almost 250 miles under green flag running. We almost got to the 100-lap mark under green flag just before we got that first caution. And does that take a lot out on you as a driver? Because you're concentrating for so long, and you get people telling, oh, you're only turning left. But actually, at Indianapolis, it's so much more than that just because of the speed that you're going at.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, some people can deal with it better than others, I think. Track temp really didn't help. I mean, you're talking 120 plus, so you have to be absolutely perfect every lap, every corner for 3 hours. So yeah, I think with the level we've got here, especially with the format, the organisation, it's brought these guys back. Everyone's at the same level and everyone's pushing as hard as they can, so no one has that brain fade that can cause issues.
Oh, well, obviously, Liam, this is probably going to be your last big event for 2019 in terms of IndyCar. 2020, it's a big year going into you've got the month of May and all of the IndyCar Elite Series and any other series that you would run with this series. Is it something which yourselves and Team Talent, you're going to go away and really sort of scrutinise everything that happened in this race and take forward into next year?
Maybe. I mean, I felt we did pretty well. There were a couple of mistakes at the end. Otherwise, I think Josh and Jeff would have joined me in second, third, fourth. So ultimately, I think Michele drove an outstanding race to make the strategy work that he pulled off and actually make it last in terms of pace is something that other guys weren't even close to doing. So I think ultimately we're happy with what we've got.
Oh, well, Liam, the floor is yours. Who would you like to give a shout out to today?
Yeah, thank you. So all the Team Talent guys, really, we haven't really got any sponsors other than Open Wheels. Tanner's one of our own. So obviously John HD is just a master at setup building. He's made an absolute machine of a car here. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, and the Kinetic Racing guys as well. They've really pushed me on this year on the roadside. So big thanks for those guys as well.
And well, Liam Quinn finishing second position here today. Randy, back to you.
So Liam Quinn comes home in the second spot today. We'll go now to the third step of the podium, and it's Mr. Henry Bennett who ends up there. And Mr. Tyler Maxson, you're going to have a word with Henry Bennett, our third place finisher tonight.
Henry, congratulations on the third place finish. It was a very long race as far as the green flag runs went. How did that kind of take a toll for you and your team as far as that went?
Oh, we prefer that completely. When you have a run of caution flags, it just turns the race into a lottery. But amazingly, I don't know how, we were a little worried about our setup, but amazingly we had a great setup. And easily ran at the front all day, but then the caution in the middle messed things up a little bit with strategy. But yeah, we're so pleased to get the car home in third. It was a bit touch and go at the end there.
Yeah, certainly was. I know a lot of drivers were kind of worried about how they could have done the fuel strategy and how they could have played that out. What was your guys' kind of strategy coming into the race, and then how did that change when you realized there was only going to be 2 caution flags?
Well, our strategy usually is to run long, and then that gives you the option to short fill at the end to get a time advantage, that's exactly what we were doing. We were staying out like 2, 3, maybe even 4 laps longer than the other leaders. But then the caution came out, and we saw we might just be able to make it to the end on 2 more stops after that caution by stretching the fuel slightly, which was working out okay until I made a mistake on that first green flag stop after that caution. Ran out of fuel in the pits trying to stretch it a tiny bit too long. That meant I came out away from the pack, which meant I had to use more fuel to catch the pack, and that kind of made my fuel saving strategy a little bit well, it wouldn't have worked. I would have been a lap short.
Well, there you go. Henry Bennett comes home in P3, but the floor is yours. Who do you want to give a shout out to, and who got it done for you at the Powerslide Motorsports?
Adam Blocker, Christopher Stouffer, both guys worked brilliantly the past couple of weeks, building sets, practicing, testing, just sport through the race and qualifying. So massive thanks to those guys, and as well as the other IndyCar guys on Powerslide who, just great teammates throughout the year. And of course, Tanner. I'd say it's one of the best, probably the best Indy 500 I've been a part of. Been part of quite a few now over the past 3 years, and this is by far the best race I've been a part of, on track as well as off track. And then you guys broadcasting, I look forward to listening to it later.
Well, congratulations once again on P3. That was Henry Bennett, Randy, and we have a few more drivers left for interviews.
Yep, we're going to move it over to the 4th place finisher today, the representative from, I thought we had him on hand, but it appears we do not. So we'll move actually with Mr. Jack Stiles. I thought I saw him somewhere, but I don't see him. But Mr. Jack Stiles, you're stood by with the 5th place finisher of Adam Blocker.
Adam, first of all, congratulations on the 5th place finish. A previous winner of this race coming into today, probably one of the most competitive fields that we've ever had with the Indianapolis 500. That was a very, very high-paced race with the very few amount of cautions we had.
Yeah, obviously only 2 cautions in the race, so a lot happening, really fast pace. Yeah, started back in 15th. Kind of took it easy for the first few laps because I thought with the cool track temps and stuff, I thought that at the beginning I thought there was going to be trouble, but there wasn't. And kind of once I realized it was going to go green, I started pushing, and I really found some speed on the high line early. I guess there wasn't a lot of rubber up there, and I seemed like the only guy up there, and I was just passing people, and ended up in the top group, top 5, at the halfway point when we got the yellow. Then, halfway, I knew I pitted, even though I didn't really need a lot of fuel. I pitted just because I thought I might be able to make it on one fewer stop like McKaylee and Henry ended up doing. But once I got into once we went back green, I just thought that we didn't have enough downforce to follow close enough to really get good fuel mileage. So I figured it was going to be faster for me to not save fuel, which I think I was right on that. But obviously if we had been able to add a little bit more downforce, I think I could have made it on fuel. But
and obviously with this race, you say about fuel, the fuel was very close towards the end, and some people playing slightly different strategies to the other. Was that something you were watching from the very start? Obviously, as the race went on, it became clear the cautions are going to be less and less. The fuel is going to be more important when we get to the end of this race.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching at the beginning of the race, and I knew that everybody was basically on the same number of stops. And then we were aware of it, like when that second caution, or when the first caution came out, halfway through the race, and that's why I pitted. But ultimately, it would have been better if I would have stayed out because I couldn't make it on fuel anyway. So it would have been better to be up there with team talent with like Liam and Chen and maybe build a gap. But yeah, I don't think it would have made a huge difference to where I finished. I think I would have probably end up, somewhere in the lower half of the top 5 anyway. So yeah, definitely a good race still.
Well, Adam, obviously you've already won the Indianapolis 500 once. Is there another win on the cards? Do you want to go for the second one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've won non-broadcasted 500 before, but top split. I haven't won the broadcasted top split in May, so that's sort of the main goal. That's the biggest race for any IndyCar person on iRacing, one of the biggest races, period, on iRacing. So, yeah, definitely, that's a huge goal going into 2020, and that's definitely a big focus for Powerslide right now, is getting me or Henry or Stouffer or Andrew Kinsella or one of these guys on the team to win it. And we put a lot of work in for this race. I think we significantly improved our race setup from May, and definitely looking forward to it when it comes around.
Well, Adam, who would you like to give a shout out to today for Powerslide Motorsports?
Just mainly big thanks. Me, Henry, and Chris Stouffer worked a lot together to improve our competitiveness over the past month. I think we're good in Q and race. Just want to give a shout out to everyone else that supports me, and big shout out to Tanner for putting on this event. It was really well organized and really competitive, so a lot of fun.
Well, Adam Blocker coming home 5th today here at the OpenWheels.com Indianapolis 500.
So there he was, Mr. Adam Blocker, and we're going to get over to a bit of a special interview here before we move on and get the last of our drivers that finish in the top 5. We're going to have a chat with Mr. Tanner Watkins, the administrator for this race. First things, Tanner, how's your feeling coming off of this? I mean, that was a race that was dominated by green flags, and I'm sure you have to be more than happy to see that as the administrator, that there's really no major dramas over the course of the race. A couple cars went around, and it was at the end of the day a very clean 500-mile race that you had here.
Yeah, I mean, as the race director and somebody running the event, you couldn't ask for anything more than as clean a race that we had today. The first goal was to simply make it through those first few corners, which we know are so dangerous at Indianapolis. Once we got through there, the field settled in pretty well. The track temp was much cooler at the start of the race than we anticipated it would be, but I was even more impressed as these guys kept it clean. As the race went on and that track temp rose. Again, like you said, I was very pleased with the drivers today. I told them yesterday in the drivers meeting that I had very high expectations for them, considering the caliber of this field and the experience of the drivers in the field today. So I can honestly say I'm ecstatic about the results of just 2 cautions across 500 miles, and both of those just being single car accidents.
And tell me a little bit about what all went into this. I know you've been probably working on this for a better part of 6 months. I've organized big events before. I know the sort of time that goes into it. Tell me about sort of the planning phase, because this 500-mile race kind of had everything. You guys had the full pull day, bump day qualifying format last week, and I know that there was practices and whatnot going on, and even on the last couple days on the run up to the race, you guys had the pit crew competition and the 100-mile race as well yesterday as well. Tell me a bit about the sort of time that goes into this event and what ended up being the culmination of it being the race, but there's so much more of it that led to it.
No, you're certainly right. There's a lot that goes along with it that some people or a lot of people may not have seen if they just tuned in for the race today. But for one, I appreciate everybody that watched today's broadcast. It was an idea that popped in my head towards the end of May. I'm fortunate to run OpenWheels.com and be credentialed by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to cover the Indy 500, and I missed out on the iRacing Indy 500 this year. I've been in the top split race for the last few years, and scheduling didn't let me partake this year, but more or less I just wanted to bring what we thought was the closest and most realistic experience of racing in the Indianapolis 500 to sim racing. And I feel like as a standalone event and a league event, we can do some things that iRacing can't quite do in their official Indianapolis 500. I began planning the event back in about first or second week of June. Worked through some pounding pavement, as we call it in the sport management business, and trying to sell sponsorships and get people to buy in on our event. And we're very lucky that not only a few key partners bought in, but a lot of people along the way that helped make this happen. Just having the support events and all the practice PDFs and media documents and compiling quotes, all that stuff just comes from essentially the real life race and trying to model as closely as we can to the real life Indianapolis 500 and give that to these drivers here on iRacing, and they put on a great show today.
And then I'm sure the question everybody wants answered: when's the next one? Are we going to see this Sunday before Thanksgiving become the traditional date? I think more than a few people would be behind that.
I think we're certainly on that path. We're definitely expected to be back for 2020, and this seems to be a pretty prime time of the year to do something like this. It's been about a couple of months now. Crazy to think it's been a couple months since the NTT IndyCar Series closed out their season, and this is also 6 months in between the both real life and iRacing Indy 500s each year. So I think we found a good niche here in the middle part of November you can expect over the next few days we're going to announce our 2020 event dates. But I think it's pretty safe to say that
Wait,
this is a
dates?
good weekend for us.
Dates? What else do you have cooking?
Well, no additional events just yet, but I might reveal that we might go to 4 days of qualifying in 2020, similar to how it used to be at Indianapolis. We'll see how many entries we get. I've entertained the thought of potential doing other events aside from Indianapolis, but I'm going to have to take a little bit of a breather before I sign up for anything like that.
Well, that's more than understanding. Before you get to that breather, Tanner, it's been an absolute blast covering this event. We did qualifying, of course, last week, both days of it, the last basically hour of the last session, the last 45 minutes or so, and then the full 500-mile race today. It was absolutely spectacular, and we loved every moment. But I know that, like you said, is a long list of names that that helped this event kind of come through. Mitchell Transmissions, of course, being the title sponsor, but feel free to run down everyone and all the companies and all the supporters you had leading up into this that made this event possible, because they're the ones that made it happen, and I'm hoping that most of them can stick on and we can make it happen next year for sure.
Yeah, again, good to mention that, Randy. Mitchell Transmissions, big support from them, and our title sponsor throughout the event. They're really the people that got this whole thing kicked off, got the momentum running, beginning back in the summer. I'd like to give a special shout out to Phil Kaiser, and through Kaiser's Visor, Phil was another massive supporter throughout the month of November. Ag Trucking was the presenting sponsor of our qualifications weekend. They helped us out and sponsored 2 days of qualifying. That was cool. The day before the 500 was sponsored by Grant King Race Shops, so that was yesterday, which hosted the Veterans 100, which Jonathan Goke presented some money towards and helped supply the prize fund for that. The pit stop competition was sponsored by the Pit Window, so thanks to Mike Silver for joining on and being the presenting sponsor of that day. And then I'll just run down our other sponsors, whether they were associates or whatnot. The Classic IndyCar Series, Derek Spear Designs. Derek's given away some button boxes, so he did a great job. Doug Raber State Farm, Fuel Racing League, the Indy Elite Series, the MyLaps Indy Elite Series. Joel Real Timing was our official timing and scoring partner. Lionheart Racing Series, the Pit Lane Parlay Podcast. They sponsored the $100 Pit Lane Parlay Poll Award, so that was a pretty cool donation from them. Racecast Weather, Smoke Me Tender Barbecue, Stephanie Lamb Glass Art, the Watering Can presented our winner's wreath for 2019. Tinker Street Restaurant and Wine Bar, Triptacular Memories, the USI Health Informatics and Information Management Program, the Vintage Indy Registry, and of course our official broadcast partner, Race Spot TV. Thank you guys so much for your support of this event. Randy, Hugo, I know Jack was on the broadcast. Will Vincent was instrumental in helping put this all together. I know he couldn't be here today, but really appreciated all the help that he presented to me in not only getting this relationship between Open Wheels and Race Spot tied together, but some of the questions I had just bouncing off of him throughout the summer while I was planning the event. Again, big thanks to Race Spot. You guys were absolutely awesome, and I can't wait to do it all again in 2020 with y'all.
I think we're looking forward to it too, Tanner. Huge thanks again, and huge thanks as well to all those names you just listed to make this event possible. But of course, as well, all the thanks to you, Tanner, for everything you did for the community here for this, and we look forward to working with you here at RaceSpot TV for the 2020 Open Wheels 500-mile race.
All right, thank you guys. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Tanner Watkins, your series administrator, everybody. He will be the penultimate interview of this broadcast. Tyler Maxson, you're stood by the last of our finishers inside of the top 5. We can now get to Simon Bryant, who came home in P4.
Simon, congratulations on P4. We saw a lot of different drivers doing a lot of different strategies throughout that race. Some drivers were going for more of the all-out strategy. Some drivers were trying to make it to the end. What was your team's take on getting all the strategies sorted out?
I think once we were kind of looking at things, thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah, I think once we were looking at things towards the end of the last caution, we knew that to get to the front, which is where we kind of wanted to be, we weren't going to have the fuel to make it all the way. So we basically had Rick kind of lead us out. I was able to save quite a bit of fuel, and that gave me some great tires for the last couple runs. So we went for short fueling and just got the car really fast. The set was really good. It worked in traffic. Traffic worked in clean air as well. So I think overall the set just allowed us to make a charge towards the end. I gained about five or four spots in the last 20 laps or so. So it was awesome to be able to put the car in that position just by going short fuel, short stops, and everything just kind of worked.
And speaking of those long green flag runs, speaking of your the setup working for you, how did those long green flag runs affect your car over the course of the long stints?
It was great for us, actually. We trimmed the car out to make sure it would be, or kind of up almost, to make sure it would be really good in traffic. That's all we focused on in the last week, is just running in traffic. I think I maybe did one stint where we just checked out just to make sure it was still not going to turn on us in clean air. But overall, the guys just did a great job putting the car together to work in traffic, and just did a fantastic job making sure we were going to be good to go on those long green flag stints. And towards the end of each stint, we definitely were able to pick up some time on folks.
And how much time goes into preparing for a race like this? This is obviously a very big event with a lot of different things happening. Kind of give us some insight into how much time your team put in to this event in particular.
I mean, we've got 6 guys on our team. And so I think all of us together, it's got to be over 500 hours, I would say, including qualifying, setup, and everything like that. So it's a big undertaking. Everyone does a really good job of doing their part. And when everyone chips in, we get a really good race car like this, and a great Q car as well. So it all kind of came together for us today, I think.
Well, again, congratulations on P4. Who gets it done for you and the entire Sadie Sim Sport team?
Obviously, I want to thank my team most of all. Brad, Rick, Adam, John, Dave. Thank you guys. Great setup work. Really great week. And we got Redline Ace, which is one of our sponsors. Everyone who kind of supports the whole Sadie organization. Thank you so much. Hope we got it done for you guys today. So.
Well, again, congratulations on 4th place. And I
you.
believe that will be our final interview for the day.
Indeed, it will be Mr. Simon Bryant, but Jack, the man of the hour, is definitely Michele Costantini, who after 200 laps of racing, 500 miles, takes the victory. And, man, that race kind of had everything, didn't it? I mean, it really didn't have a lot of cautions, only 2. And like Tanner said, both the incidents were kind of single-car incidents. No, we kind of went the full event. No one really did anything really silly or... there was definitely some question marks in strategy, but I'm going to be honest, that may have been the cleanest 500-mile race I've ever seen here on the iRacing service.
Yeah, I would probably agree. 2 cautions, and as you say, the cautions that we did get were single-car incidents by the looks of things. It really was a good race from everyone out there today. Lovely clean racing and very high-paced racing as well. There aren't many 500-mile races that you can get done in just under 2.5 hours, especially at Indianapolis. So for these guys, a brilliant race. For Michele, it was textbook all the way. It was what he needed. It's been what he's been wanting for so long, and for him to finally get it in the way that he did, he's going to be over the moon, and he's going to definitely take that into next year. Good momentum for him going into 2020.
And Tyler, I know that this is the first 500-mile broadcast you've done here with us on Race Spot TV. You were there for the qualifying. This is just such a special event for everybody involved. It was such a high level of organization, so many sponsors, so many supporters, and it's so great to see all of that pay off to be such a memorable 500-mile race here in the month of November. And I think all of us are just hoping and praying that maybe we can expect some Indianapolis Motor Speedway action to preface our Thanksgiving dinners, I think, every week. I think more than a handful of us in the U.S. will be more than pleased to make that a yearly thing.
Oh, I would personally be more than pleased to set apart some time and do that. But like you said, there was just so much time. You even just heard from Simon Bryant there. He estimates over 500 hours to put into this. So these guys really put in the time here to make this just an incredible race. And not only the drivers and the teams, but also the admins. They really had this event planned out, and everything just went so perfectly. And I think that speaks great numbers for the amount of time and preparation that they did for this race. So really, for me, I think that this is probably one of the cleanest and one of the most organized Indy 500s I've ever seen on the iRacing service.
I can't agree more. I think it is the best private event that has ever been held on the iRacing service, and I don't think it's even close. We thank you all for joining us during our coverage of the OpenWheels.com 500-mile race here on RaceSpot TV and on the iRacing Esports Network. It's been a fantastic month of November, and it's been a fantastic race. Huge thanks to the broadcast partners that made this possible, Jack Stiles and Tyler Maxson, who brought all the action to you alongside myself, Randy Chineth, and Istvan Ballo from ChatCams 22 and TrackCams Gourmet for the beautiful camera angles you see that we utilize. But what an event here tonight from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it's going to be Michele Costantini who takes victory after 200 laps of action. And we hope to see you all in some of our future broadcasts, and we hope to see you all next year so we can see who is going to take victory in the Open Wheels 500-mile race in 2020. But until then, and until we see you, have fun, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.